Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I want to welcome you to our Select Board meeting. Would you please stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Again, I want to thank you very much for coming here. And I would ask again, if you have a cell phone, put it in airplane mode, it sure be appreciated. And if you're in emergency situations, please leave it on if you expect a call. Thank you. But the first order of business, the public hearing for RSA 41, semicolon 14A, for the purpose of land for turnaround on Wildcat Road. And the current turnaround has a temporary one created in 1989. The current owner of that lot feels the use has been too long to be considered temporary. The town would pay up to $10,000 for this land. The board has received the opinion of the planning board, which without objection recommended proceeding. The board has received the opinion of the Conservation Commission, which has no problem with proceeding. This is the second of two public hearings. The board will intend to take a vote in 2 weeks unless there is a petition to stop the proceedings. Opening it up, does the board members have any questions, please? Does anybody from the public have questions, please, whether for or against? Seeing none, I'll go back to the board again. Do you have any final questions? All right, I will close the public hearing for the property on Wildcat Trade Turnaround. Thank you. Next we have Police Chief Bob, if you'd want to come in here and make your presentation, please. For everybody here, this is our Police Chief.
Thank you. Thank you for letting us use this venue to announce some promotions within the agency. We've not added additional supervisors. We still have the same number of supervisors for the last 2 decades. What we've done is realign the supervisory structure to better serve the community and the agency. Here with me tonight are Katie O'Brien, George Joy. I'll start with Katie. Katie's been in the law enforcement profession for 9 years. She holds a bachelor's and master's degree. She's a dedicated, trustworthy professional who holds herself and others accountable to high standards of performance, including me and George. It's a joke. Thank you.
It was awful dry.
She's become a go-to supervisor, just has the keen ability to get the job done and done right. Katie has moved the Barrington Police Department forward. We've implemented about 45 new policies that meet today's contemporary law enforcement standards. Katie drafted about 20 of them for approval. She oversaw the MDT upgrades to include e-ticket. The MDTs are the police computer system within the cruisers. She oversaw the entire computer upgrade within the police department just a few months ago and created a training program for staff to effectively use the new technology enhancement. Katie also implemented an electronic scheduling system, criminal case management system through our existing police reporting software, and helped with the police lien process for our impending renovation, and led the presentation in this very room at a public meeting. These are just some of her administrative accomplishments, but Katie's also out there keeping the community safe. She's self-motivated and has a high number of traffic stops and criminal investigations. She had one of the biggest drug busts in town by removing about 50 grams of crystal meth in Barrington, and worked with the Stratford County Attorney's Office by securing indictments. Another example, one night around 2 in the morning, Katie responded to a domestic disturbance and located a male suspect outside in the snow. After it was reported he had attacked his girlfriend and child and was armed with a knife. She was able to safely take him into custody by herself and then checked on both victims, who were actually okay. These are just a few accomplishments that have kept us safe. Katie's been promoted from sergeant to the rank of lieutenant. Thank you, Lieutenant O'Brien, for everything you do. Congratulations. George Joy. George has been with the agency since 1999. He's served all his 20 years in Barrington. Over 20 years of service, he's been promoted to sergeant, then lieutenant, and now deputy chief. Anyone who knows George knows he's hardworking and he's committed to this new role in the community. He's accepted his promotion as a salaried position. And with that, I've already had to order him to go home because he's working too much. He's a true professional who goes above and beyond the call of duty to get the job done. For example, our last fatal crash in October at around 10 at night, George was on vacation. He just got back home a few hours before the crash after driving from Ohio. As I arrived at the crash scene, here comes George pulling up right behind me. I didn't call him. He was still on vacation and wasn't due back to work for a few more days. But the dispatch center didn't know this. Called him, and George responded without hesitation. George knew the two younger officers working that night were responding to their first fatal crash. He felt he had to get there and offer support and guidance like any great leader. I'll give you one more example of his professionalism, dedication, and leadership qualities. I was appointed chief in 2015 after a nationwide search completed by a company named MRI. There were approximately 40 to 50 applicants. George was one of those applicants. George finished number 6. After not getting the job, he could have quit, he could have become disgruntled and given me the cold shoulder from coming from another agency. But he didn't. George is a true professional. He welcomed me into the agency and helped me every step along the way. It's tough to develop a promotional process for a 20-year leader who's already achieved multiple promotions. So I blindsided him. I didn't tell him what the process was. I gave him about a 15-minute notice and then put George in front of 2 area chiefs who had climbed the ladder at their agencies and had recently been promoted to chief of police, Dover and Rochester. That's pressure and stress at an executive level. George did fine. At the end of the interview with both chiefs said he's ready to move up, and I couldn't agree more. George Joy has been promoted from lieutenant to deputy chief with full authority to run the Barrington Police Department in my absence. Thank you, George, you've earned it. Thank you. Thank you.
Chief, thank you very much. I appreciate that. On behalf of the board, I'd like to thank both of you. 1, for coming to Barrington, and 2, for your service. We all appreciate it very much. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. John, a couple of minutes to start.
Thank you, John.
Yeah, thank you.
No, I got yours.
And the next item on the agenda is the HDA Construction Administrator's contract for Mallego Road Bridge. We have with us Jill and Aaron, who would like to speak to. Would you like to speak first, or would you like to speak to the questions being asked? Which would you like to do?
We don't have a specific presentation prepared. We're here to answer any questions.
All right. If you would please come up to the microphone, please. There would be a speech.
Right, so it's Aaron LaChance with Hoyle Tanner, and as I mentioned, we don't have a specific presentation prepared, but we can answer any questions that the board has about the proposed contract.
Some of the questions on the contract is to provide the service of inspection and what have you. It's just the lightness of it. And any of the board members have other questions, now is the time for us to take it. Who would like to go first? Dan, please.
Can I have my expert witness? I asked for him to review it with me. Was a certified engineer review it?
We had said that we were going to allow those comments under public comment. When we
As a selectman, I'm allowed to gather information if I cannot do it, and make the resources to gather the proper information. You allowed me to, last time to do it, I would like to have him now.
All right, question. Does anybody on the board object to Mr. Ayer bringing in an outside person to speak on this matter? Tracy?
Nope, I'm comfortable.
Okay, thank you. All right, we will do that, give you 3 minutes for that to take care of. Go ahead, please.
Brian, do you wish to comment for me? All right, by the ones to follow.
I don't know if I am an expert. I am a licensed engineer, and I did work for the DOT for 10 years and on quite a few bridge projects. The thing there, and I guess that I don't understand, and I'm sure it's standard in the business, but the word observation comes up a lot more times than the word inspection. But the TRA, if you go to the, hopefully you can get a sense of what I'm talking about. But in the TRA, one of their on it'd be are
you referring to the bidding document, Ryan?
no, I'm referring to the TRA right now, which is the rules, state rules that are published, right? That you people work to the requirements of.
I'm not familiar with that acronym. I can speak to the specs that we follow.
Well, I thought TRA was something that the DOT had, the New Hampshire DOT had for projects that were municipal and town funded. It's TRA 501. Let me read what it is, if it is applicable, but I'm looking at the TRA 500. This is TRA 501.12. In paragraph C, it says, during construction, the work shall be inspected by the municipality as a construction engineering cost as necessary to ensure conformity with the approved plans and specifications, including the following. And it lists some of the things that obviously you do. Review of shop drawings, inspection of fabricated materials, and I can show where you say that you're going to go to the precast situation 2 times, and it says to observe fabrication, but they use the word inspection of fabrication. Not that that's a big deal, but I just don't understand. I think I do understand from a liability and attorney standpoint why they use the word that they don't like the word inspection versus observation. But it says inspection of fabricated materials, review and inspection of false work, which I don't see that listed in your duties that are going to be done by the RPR or anybody else. Laboratory and field testing materials, which I think Coleman did a real nice job on their proposal and on what they're doing. And then it says field inspection of work performed at the project site. So this, out of those 5 things that they are saying, among the things that are being done, the word inspection is used in 2, 3, and 5. There's 3 times there where at the same time you people use the word observation. And I think there's a subtle difference between an observation of something and the inspection of something. But that's really what, when you get into the RPR business, you do have an editorial error where you refer to on the duties and responsibilities of the RPR. There's a thing in SC, it's SC 10.03, in your building requirement contract documents. That Article 10, engineer status, is SC 10.03. B is where the RPR's responsibility, and you have an editorial error where you're saying they're in SC 9.10. That's a minor editorial thing. But I guess it's just, there's places where, like it's in I guess the other thing I'm interested in is in C3 on your plan. You say,
Mr. Lindsay?
Yes.
I will, what does the board object to 2 more minutes?
No.
Board, you've got 2 more minutes, sir.
yeah. C3, you say, provide construction contract administration, shop drawing, product submittal reviews, and process pay requisitions. I guess what confuses me is what is the contract administration? That's used in a couple of places on the pay thing, but there's really nowhere. There's nowhere in your documents where it's really. It doesn't say exactly what administration is, and it's just for the cost of the that without any real. It doesn't say what it is, what administration is, and to me the contractor does more administration of the job than the consultant would. We already talked about observed fabrication, but the only thing I had on the labor rate table was there's a couple of things there on the things that I didn't understand was the record drawings, what we call as-built drawings. This isn't a building or anything. It's really a pretty small project, so I just don't see how the heck for record drawings that you got 40 hours down for the CAD technician when really that you've got the plan for the bridge. You're going to have a few as-built changes, very few I would think on a bridge compared to a building or something. So I just don't see how you have 40 hours of CAD work for an as-built drawing for that small bridge. And the other thing was it says you've got 12, 16, 24 hours, $1,400, 25 hours total for the Form 4 bridge capacity rating. I mean, you've got all the data to build the bridge and everything. It seems like that is that a 1 or 2? Do you know what that thing that goes to DOT? How that Form 4 is? How big is that? 2 pages? Or it just seems like that's a lot of time for something that would sound to me to be pretty simple. I understand. I doubt that there's a need to change inspection to observation to inspection, but it seems funny that the state even allows that to be used in the sense when they specifically say that those are inspections that are required.
Two minutes. Thank you very much. Dan, do you have anything else, please?
I don't know, I'm not really that qualified, and stuff. I looked at the contract and I noticed it, and it seems like SW Cole, they do a lot of the bulk of the work with inspection materials and stuff, and I couldn't add up the time and the price, and that's why I asked for help.
Understandable. Any other selectmen have a comment, please?
I just had a general comment on, when I looking at it, I was a little flabbergasted as a whole by the total cost associated with a precast bridge. It kind of caught me a bit off guard. And looking at figure if it was a 12-week project, I mean that's 24 plus hours a week from a part-time person on site. Including senior engineers, project manager, and an engineer. 3 by the looks of it. So, and I know based on our experience on the last one on Young Road, I don't feel, at least my personal experience based on the work that was done, there were several problems that needed to be corrected at the end, and it still didn't quite come out the way I believe it probably should have, considering we had swale issues at the end, we had guardrails that had to be removed, and we spent a pretty significant amount of money to get that right the first time around. So I don't understand why this one is so expensive when this one is seems pretty straightforward.
Yes, please.
Okay,
Please.
great. Okay, so I took some notes. I'll try to address these questions in the order that they were presented. So we'll talk first on this observation versus inspection comment, and that's a good pickup. It's a legal term. We do observe in a part-time fashion. This is a part-time observation contract So during construction, depending on the intensity of the construction that's happening, we're making part-time visits either 1 to 3 times a week, depending on, again, how much is happening. So if we were full-time, we might be able to consider using the word inspection, though in general in this industry, we don't use that term inspect. We don't inspect the work. We observe what's happening. We observe for conformance with the contract documents. If what's being constructed is out of conformance, we notify our client and we decide how to proceed. So it is actually not an inspection. We observe the work for conformance with the contract docs. In our construction contracts, we've had this same language in many contracts in other communities for the construction phase, reviewed and approved by DOT, and they never had an issue with that language, so that's pretty standard. The document that we follow as far as the Bridge Aid program are the New Hampshire DOT standard specifications for road and bridge construction, and so all of the work that is in the contract is in conformance with that. So I'll take a look at the TRA, but that might be more of an LPA, locally administered project document, and I will be back to the board if there's anything applicable to this contract as far as that goes. Good pickup. You notice that in our construction contract, construction phase contract, the engineer status reference was incorrect. We recently updated the specifications to a new version, missed that update in our contract, so we did catch that as well. Well, we caught it after you pointed it out. So construction administration, that is the process of all of the paperwork on the town side, the owner side, necessary to move forward with the project. Executing the agreement, dealing with change orders, the paperwork that the town would otherwise do that we do on behalf of the town, helping the town prepare reimbursement requests to DOT, which I guess in this case it's not a reimbursement program, but getting all the paperwork together that allows the town to be reimbursed upon completion of construction.
Could you, just before you go any further, how do you mean it's not a reimbursement? We're getting 80% back?
It is not an incremental reimbursement. It's a reimbursement at the completion.
Okay.
Some projects are a monthly reimbursement. This is your remaining 40% upon completion. So, all right. So the comment was about the as-built drawings taking 40 hours, and that not much should change given that this is a bridge project. And there are ultimately there's always changes, and whether it's minor cross slope change or change in length of guardrail, things get tweaked in construction. We like to have those record drawings be as accurate as possible, and so we collect the contractor's red line sets. We have our red line drawings that we've created from our site visits, and we compile those and create a pretty comprehensive set of drawings that reflects anything that might have changed, final quantities, those sorts of things. Is 40 hours high? Perhaps. Depends on how much has changed, and this is not a lump sum contract. It is essentially a time and materials with an upset limit, so if we don't use those hours, we don't bill the town those hours. So we don't like to come back with amendments, so we try to be comprehensive with our estimates, and we think 40 hours is not something where we have to come back and ask for more time or fee. Similar with the Form 4, the final document is just a few pages, but there are additional low-grading calcs that we need to put together. In particular, this is a precast box beam or a deck beam structure. We don't do the calcs on the deck beam. Those come from the precast manufacturer, so we have to pull those together and compile a full Form 4 package. So there is some effort there. Those calcs have to be done and checked, and sometimes there's some back and forth with the precaster. So that 40 hours captures that effort. All right, so SW Cole, they are our materials testing subconsultant. We have a fee, an estimated fee of about $10,000. That's concrete testing for strength at every placement. That's compaction testing, and again, that's a reimbursable expense, meaning that we don't take that as a lump sum. We only pass the cost on to the town of the testing that's actually performed. So if the contractor comes in and they're very efficient and have very few concrete placements, there'll be less testing of concrete, but this firm is a smaller firm, and we're assuming that they'll perhaps have many concrete placements, so I think that testing allowance will come in handy. And the Young Road. project was brought up, some of the issues that were encountered on that, and that did not go as smoothly as we like our projects to go. And we definitely, we acknowledged what some of those issues were. We came to the table and helped with the guardrail issue, picked up some of the costs of correcting that guardrail issue. Internally have talked about some of the problems, particularly transitions and cross slopes, and where guardrail terminals are considered, and some of the drainage issues. So we had some lessons learned on that, and I guess I'll say that we acknowledge that it could have gone smoother, and this one will.
I just know from my end, my frustration on that, and I think probably a few other people's. I know Casey's here, he was a selectman at the time. There were a lot of items that we raised pretty early in that project, especially around the blasting, that could have been addressed sooner and didn't. We were told, oh, it's all going to get taken care of. It won't be an issue. And in the end of it, we still.
The ownership of the blasted material issue, where it was promised to the abutter, is that what we're talking about?
Well, some of it being promised to the abutter, and some of it just not being blasted back far enough that we ended up with a 2-foot drainage slope on the side of the road. So now our drainage slope is right up against the edge of the road with riprap, as opposed to being 2 feet back off the shoulder of the road.
Right.
The rock was on me, as far as not telling them that it had to go to the abutter rather than to the pit.
So I also want to talk a little bit about the hours and the duration and then sort of the magnitude of this total contract. So what we've estimated, included in the construction documents, that's what the town bid out and the contractors bid on, was a 6-month construction duration, beginning 5/1 and extending through 10/25 to substantial completion. So assuming, again, that 1 visit per week during slow construction activity and 3 visits per week during times of heavy activity, plus 2 visits to the precast plants, that gives us a total of 42 visits. And if the contractor comes in and completes this in half the time that we've included in the construction contract, then we won't need 40 visits, we'll need whatever number of visits were used up to that point. This is a much more substantial structure than Young Road was. This is, again, precast deck beams. There's cast-in-place abutments on both sides, so it's not a precast rigid frame that comes in as one assembly. It's multiple more steps than a rigid frame, so it's considerably more complicated, and almost 4 times the construction value that Young Road was.
Just out of curiosity from my end, and probably the only reason I know anything about it is because I have a really good friend who did precast concrete for a living. He was the safety manager for it. So what do you expect to gain by 3 visits to a precast concrete company? Because most of it, from what I see, is when you go in, really what you're looking at is their documents and their paperwork. You're checking their paperwork because they only pour during certain periods. Even with pre-stress, they set it all up, and then they do all the pours usually in 1 day or within a couple days.
So the number of visits, it depends on the facility. What we check for, the reinforcing is correct, all the reinforcing has the clear cover, the correct number of reinforcing strands, shear stirrups, all that stuff. And clear cover is a big one. We see that oftentimes that's not correct, and that's what's going to cost the town money down the road. When those reinforcing bars that are too close to the surface of the concrete corrode, you have spalling, you have maintenance issues that you wouldn't have if it had the correct cover. And it depends on how long the precast beds are. So most of the time they cast these beams in a single length or a long bed. And so it depends on the facility. If they can fit them all and do it in 2 placements, then maybe it's only 2 visits to check that stuff. If they have something going on and for some reason they have to do 4 castings, we may only get to see 3 of the beams. It depends. It's an assumption. And we can talk with the town if something changes and we say, hey, listen, we made 3 visits. It really looks like we need to make another visit down. We're going to save money on these other tasks. It's an assumption, and we can work through it. But we try to be conservative and have enough time in there to do it.
And are we using photo documentation or anything through their processes, and then getting copies of all those photos, as well as, excuse me, inspection reports?
Correct.
that they're providing?
They,
Typically, like a precast company will do all their own inspections and validate their castings, and then usually they'll provide those reports upon request.
yeah, we can include those. I'm not sure that we normally do that, and I will tell you, more often than not, we are asking the precaster to make adjustments because what they've tied up for reinforcement does not meet the contract docs. So even though they're following their safety standards and whatever they put in their documentation is showing that they're doing it right, ultimately it's not, as far as the contract drawings go.
Yeah, I know that's where pictures become really handy, because if you have good photos of all of their systems, you can point out right to them, and then, like I said, I've seen them eat some decks that they've made because they didn't meet standards.
Yeah, we've had to reject sections of precast before, and it's not what you want to do, so you try to catch it before they place the concrete, and it's less expensive for everyone.
Mrs. Hatch.
I'm just not being an engineer. I really mind to sit, talk to the ones that know what they're talking about. I have a great deal of faith in Brian.
Selectperson Hardekopf.
I wish I understood more about this issue. All I did was work the number of site visits based on the amount of mileage to and from your office, which is about what I could contribute. I have to follow the majority on this.
Okay, and that being, go back to Dan, just start the question again, please, Dan?
So the town is the client.
The town is the client.
Who's your contact person?
During construction, it's been a hybrid of Peter and the select board. Usually John is the first point of contact, depends on what the issue is.
And then all the easements secure.
Connor, I believe?
Yes.
And then inspections. Are you gonna change that language or?
I don't think so. I think that's this contract's been run through our legal counsel, and this is what's approved as the industry accepted term.
And then these observations, they've been licensed, they'll be there?
All the work is being done under the supervision of a licensed professional engineer. At times it will be a licensed professional engineer, but all work is done under the direct supervision of a licensed New Hampshire professional engineer.
And who's gonna be at the pre-construction meeting?
The resident project representative, likely myself as the overall project manager, perhaps Jill as well as the task manager for construction, and representatives from the town, police, fire, all, and whoever else we designate as necessary.
And then all this paperwork I went through and stuff, I didn't see adjustment of fee at the end. Is it referred in there?
Adjustment of fee.
You're saying, you're just making statements that we don't use up the hours, you'll charge us less.
Yes,
If
so
the project gets done in 3 months,
I think what he's saying, this is a not to exceed, but if it's less hours, then it's less because it's billed time and material, not a flat sum.
So on Exhibit C, underneath the total compensation, it says the estimated amounts shall equal the cumulative hours charged by each class of consultant's personnel time, applicable standard hourly rates for each category. So that's legal speak for we'll bill you for the hours that we charge.
I know this law, these are all, your paper, I looked, it was very lengthy and stuff, and I just looked for the best interest of the guarantee of the protection of the town, not myself.
That's what we're looking for as well.
Aaron, on page 7, under 10 for records, in Section A says prepare a daily report or keep a diary or a logbook recordings of contractors' hours for on-site subcontractors, etc. It goes on to talk about record the names and addresses and etc. Maintain all records. So that's going to be on hand for any one of us, or for Peter and or one of the administrators, town administrators that come down and look. That's on the new handout you brought to us right here. Item 10 in the records.
I think what you're looking at is a section
That's Article 10.
This
That
is
was
from the
misnumbered
bid
as Article 9.
document.
That was
From the
previously
bid
referenced.
document, not from the
Dan, can you give me your copy of it?
administration contract you're sending them.
Just show him so he knows what
Okay.
George is talking about.
This is what it, this is supposed to be for, and which is what you just read from.
Was it 9 or 10?
10.
That.
10.3B.
Because with that articles that you send us and that material, it gives us a better chance to further explain to everybody on the board that's not familiar with all the engineering terms and everything else, a chance to come in and have it explained, or we go to them and make sure they all understand it, that's what we need to do. And if somebody from the public were to ask us a question, we would have that information. That's why it's important for that consideration there. Thank you.
So
Andy, you had another question, would you like to ask it?
Yeah, you made a statement that everyone that would be on site would be working under the purview of a licensed engineer. If you have, where is that accounted for in the construction phases hourly billing sheet? Because all I see is the project manager, there's the discipline lead, and then everything is an engineer. It's an engineer 1, 2, or 3 from there. So I'm trying to figure out where that person fits, who is not a licensed engineer but is working under the purview of an engineer. Because I know the rate of a non-licensed engineer is significantly lower than that of a licensed engineer.
Okay, so our rate categories don't distinguish between licensed and unlicensed. I can't promise you that every engineer that will be on site will be licensed, but the individuals that we have programmed for this project are all licensed engineers. So that's how we structured this. So, for example, the engineer 3 category and the engineer 2 category, both the individuals that would fill that labor category are licensed professional engineers. And for this specific project, the senior engineer 1, discipline lead, and project manager 1 are all licensed professional engineers as well. I think there's only one individual that we might program in that is not a licensed PE, and he's sitting for his PE exam this April. So the hours for that purview are specifically under the PM1 category, discipline lead category, and senior engineer 1 category.
And looking at the hours calculation, on a 20-week schedule, that breaks out to 42.1 hours per week on site.
What were the dates that you used to derive that?
5/1 to 10/25. 842 hours, 20 weeks, is 42.1 hours.
Per week total time?
Per week total time.
Okay.
So is our expectation that we will have an engineer or somebody on site full-time every week?
No.
Okay.
About half of the proposed labor hours are in the field, and the other half are office time. So there's shop drawing review that is figured into the hour summary that you quoted there, as well as all the upfront time and the meeting time. The hours are, it's about 398 off-site hours and 444 on-site hours. There are, I don't have the specific list of shop drawings handy, but given the precast elements, there's a fair amount of labor in reviewing those shops, making sure they conform with the contract docs, reinforcing shops for the cast in place abutments, water diversion, working drawings for the erection of the beams, that sort of stuff. So I guess to answer your question succinctly, there's a lot of office time that is not on-site time.
So 50% of it's off-site time?
Yes.
It just seems significantly high.
There's a lot, the Bridge Aid program, the DOT expects a lot of oversight from us. They expect that this is going to be designed up front in accordance with their specs and then fabricated in construction. So there is a lot that goes into it.
Anybody else have any questions?
I just have another question. Is there anything that's uniquely one-off about this project?
Yes. It's a 45-degree skew, 50-degree skew.
Right, but didn't we talk about adjusting the wing wall so we have a really long wall on it? Like we talked about changing the angle, or allowing the angle to come in so that it has a really like extended pier on it, so that we didn't have to come up with funky angles in the design or the skew of it because of the angle on that.
We evaluated that,
conversation.
and it was a more cost-effective solution for what we ended up with the final design.
Right.
There's a lot of over-construction, there's a lot of structure outside of the roadway that you don't need with that over-extension, and the cost savings or the uniqueness of the skew and the structure type are a more economical solution than the over-construction.
Right. So by doing it that way, it keeps it more in tradition with standard construction or standard design, correct?
The alternative that you suggested, or
no,
what we ended up with?
what you're going with.
What we're going with, it results in a lower initial construction cost, a lower maintenance cost because there's less structure for the town to maintain, a more aesthetically pleasing structure because there isn't a large triangle of structure unfilled in the opposite corners like you have to do with that alternative. And it's the right engineering solution as well as I think the right solution for the town.
Because I believe that was what, originally when we had talked about this, that's what it was, and there was going to be a fairly, because otherwise it created a funky angle from a deck engineering standpoint, if I remember correctly. It's been a while since we had this initial conversation.
But
Right.
you went with the funky angle.
We did. We went with the high skew structure, and is the most. It was challenging to design, and it's a little bit unique. It's not. It's within the design parameters for pre-stressed concrete, but it's at the limit.
So with pre-stressed concrete, much of it falls within a pretty standard engineering skew, if I'm not mistaken. So I'm just really concerned about like the hours that are tied to all of that, because I know because they're going to use a standard form to fit up the pre-stress, which is why we talk about the angle at which they're doing that, because otherwise it doesn't fit within their standard pre-built form. Correct.
So just the bulkhead, and so the bulkheads, when you have a precast beam, it's whatever length. They have beds that are 3 feet or 4 feet wide typically. So when you have a skewed beam, all it means is that the bulkheads, the short 3 or 4 foot section at the ends, end up being skewed. So it's standard forms. There's a little bit of extra reinforcing at the end to accommodate that skew, but it's not specialty forms. We had to look at some unique stresses that a beam of that skew induces, but that's been designed in and we're covered.
So that's already designed in there.
Correct.
Yeah.
So the complication of the unique skew that's been taken care of in the design phase.
So I'm just struggling with where we expect all these extra hours to be spent and inspections to be spent on that, since it's already.
We have the list of shop drawings that we've assumed that will be submitted. We assume a maximum of 2 submittals per shop drawing to work back and forth with the fabricator or the contractor on discrepancies. So if you can take a look at those shop drawings that I suppose that we would like to remove from our scope, we can consider that. I'm not sure that DOT would be okay, but we can have that discussion.
And do you have a pre-stressed manufacturer already picked out, someone you intend to work with?
We do not. That is on the contractor. They will put it out to bid, and whatever precast manufacturer gives them the lowest price that meets the contract requirements, I'm assuming they'll go with them.
On that, to add to his, then you're going to use the limits that you put in here, anything less than 300 miles to prevent the damage of it being sent here to us. That's in your contract. I'm just reasserting that so everybody else understands that you're not going to go out past 300 miles from Barrington to have that cast made.
That assumption is in our construction engineering contract for a mileage and an hourly limitation. I don't believe there's anything within the construction contract that actually precludes them from using someone in western New York, but it wouldn't be cost effective, and I don't see that case would arise. So if it did, we would talk with the board and figure out how to proceed, whether it meant a change order to include include additional compensation. Again, there's enough tasks and fee for other visits and whatnot that the mileage could be used from that sort of other pot of money to cover, or the fee from other visits, if you will. So I can't tell you that if they propose, a facility in New York, that we will say they can't. It would be no additional cost to the town as far as the construction contract goes, because they've bid at their value, and that's what they're holding to. But it would be more time for us to get to the facility and get back in the mileage, so we would address that if it came up.
Thank you. Is there any other questions from the board? Board have any other questions? John, do you have any?
Not on this contract. If this contract is fully explained, maybe, Aaron, you want to mention the archaeology amendment that we need on Green Hill Road?
Okay, so for Green Hill Road, we are in the design phase now. During the engineering study phase, we engaged, or had a meeting with the New Hampshire DOT Cultural Resources Committee that covers archaeology, and, Jill, what's the other? Historical, thank you. That's part of the DOT requirement, and it's necessary consultation to ultimately get an NHDES wetlands permit. As part of that, they identified the Isinglass River as a potential location for pre-contact artifacts, Native American artifacts, so they requested that a phase 1 investigation be done. We engaged with independent archaeological consulting, a firm out of Portsmouth, to come out and do a phase 1 assessment, which is essentially looking at the topography and figuring out whether or not there might be artifacts there. I believe they might do some limited test pits as part of the phase 1A. From that, a report is generated, and the conclusion of the phase 1A that was in our other contract was that a phase 1B investigation be done, which is a more intensive series of test pits. And the NHDOT Cultural Resources folks concurred with that recommendation and have requested that as part of the project we conduct a phase 1B. So we prepared a contract modification to do that phase 1B, and that's what I presented the board with.
And that was $1,900.
Again, all these costs we're talking about are state aid bridge program, reimbursable 80% NHDOT and 20% town share.
Tracy has a question, please.
Can you share what was found that indicated there should be a secondary, more extensive study?
I don't believe I can because it is considered confidential when they do these archaeological investigations. I can share it with the board, and then the board can decide what to do with it, but essentially they don't want treasure hunters going out and looking in these locations and finding these artifacts.
So you could go into non-public with him to get it.
I have a question. How far, what's the size of the radius that they used for the investigation?
They looked at the potential area of excavation that would be disturbed as part of the project, as part of the bridge replacement, that would be otherwise undisturbed. So anywhere where there's a roadway, the presumption is that that's disturbed and there's no artifacts. So it's the new sides, the roadway side slopes.
Okay, but then when they did that figure, John just shared the drawing with me. When they did that, they also take into construction vehicle use of the area also for going in that particular area when they did this?
We, on the plan that we provided them, indicated the area of any construction impact, so yes.
Okay, thank you, answer my question. John, do you have any other questions to go on?
Does the board desire to go into non-public?
I would like to know what it is that's found.
All right. Okay, for the audience information, we're going to go into non-public for not more than 15 minutes so we can discuss the findings of the archaeological study. So this will be under reputation, so I will entertain a motion.
So move.
I have a motion, do I have a second? Bailey, aye?
Hardekopf, aye.
Mr. Ayer, yea or nay? Do you want a non-public session?
Doesn't matter.
Thank you. I know.
We have roll call.
So we have enough days. It's now,
You're staying.
I was saying? Okay.
You're staying, that's why they're going
I guess I know.
non-public. Okay, recording.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. I'm sorry for the inconvenience. Now, is there any further questions?
I just want to make sure, like, I know kind of tying back when you talked a little bit about Young Road, but are we going to make sure we get the angles right on this one? Because I know the angles on the Young Road one were all jacked up on the precast.
We will get the angles right. You can put that as an assumption in the contract if you'd like. Assumption A49, we will get the angles right.
Go ahead.
I don't mind.
I mean, because we ended up having to eat that on the last one in the sense that it was like, well, we can remake it all, but I would expect through inspection we would get that right.
For observation.
Inspection.
Considering
you're supposed to be doing
I
inspection.
specifically would like you to measure the angles.
Just let's get it right. I mean,
Can we have a motion to approve the archaeology contract amendment for $1,926.70?
I just have a question. I'm looking at referring to, are we still on Green Hill? Thank you.
Yes, Green Hill.
We have 4 hours allocated to that. Is that it seems, is the 4 hours of the archaeological piece of it, or is Hoyle and Tanner doing something with that?
That is 4 hours. So to correct the number, John, the total amendment amount is the sum of $19,2670 and $627. And the 4 hours is that $627. That's administration. It's engaging IAC for a contract, executing the contract, invoicing the PM, the other legwork associated with coordinating with them, reviewing their report when it comes to us as a draft, and then forwarding it on and coordinating with DOT the findings for the next phase, and hopefully closing out the coordination with the cultural resources folks.
So the total of the amendment is $2,553.70.
Correct.
Better than attorneys.
Almost. Do I have a motion, please?
A motion to amend.
I'll second it. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed? Seeing none?
Does the board want to take action tonight on the construction
Motion carries.
administration contract conditional upon state approval, or you want to wait for state approval? Do you want to make a motion to approve the construction administration contingent upon state approval at this time?
I like to stay approval.
I'm sorry?
I would like to wait for state approval.
Based on the information we have, contingent upon state approval, I would make a motion to accept the HTA contract oversight.
I'll second that. Further comment, please, from the board?
Which, are we talking Green Hill or?
Mallego.
No.
So everyone's good with.
Provided we have state approval.
Contingent upon state approval.
I just want to make sure we have a good breakdown of this, because like I said, I'm really concerned when I look at $114,000 for engineering based on.
It's my understanding that that's the maximum amount and that the actual bill could potentially be lower than that. Is that what I'm understanding?
That's correct.
Thank you.
It could be higher too.
It can't be higher, that's a capped contract.
No, it isn't capped.
No, it ain't, yeah.
Is it capped or isn't it?
It's not capped.
We would have to amend this contract. Right. We cannot exceed this amount without the board's approval.
Right, but in the contract, the specific.
Allows you to do it.
Per section 10, whatever, that you can come back and.
Ask for more money.
Right.
It's up to the board to approve it at that time or not.
It is, but when you have a road that isn't open and something's not happening and everybody grinds to a halt, guess what happens? Everybody opens the wallet whether they like it or not.
Have we had a situation where this particular contractor has had to come back to us for additional funds?
You know, we had this exact situation when we talked about the precast on Young Road.
But that project came in under bid by $30,000.
Thank you.
But it was
So I
way
would
expensive.
continue with the motion if
We have a
Contingent
motion
upon
and a
state
second. Any other further comment? There's no other comment, I'll call for a vote. All those in favor say aye.
Roll call.
Just ask for roll call, Bailey, aye.
Like it?
Hardekopf, aye.
Yeah, no, I'm visually provided.
Okay, the information is votes 4-1. Thank you very much. And I want to thank Aaron and Jill for coming here. I appreciate that, for spending time with us.
Is there any other issue? I'm going to the Stratford Select Board on the 26th to talk about the detour. I've talked to the major landowner out there as well. So it looks like the detour over that road, hopefully I'll have news by the end of the month.
Great. Did the select board go there and post it? Can I go to it?
You can come.
There's a conflict with the Round Pond meeting with Rochester here, it's at the same time, so either or.
You've got either one.
All right, but you're gonna post it? Although we're going to meet.
You're posting the Round
This
Pond
meeting
one.
is posted, the meeting with the Stratford Select Board is not.
Well, the Stratford Select Board will post as a Stratford Select Board, and it's their meeting.
So the three of us show up, we're covered.
Yeah.
Thank
Anyone
you.
come to Stratford, welcome to.
I do ask that you have them hang around, because you did say that you would offer up
I
any
did.
other comment in public comment, which is
Right.
preceding this.
Thank you. All right, we'll move right into public comment. Is there any public comment?
Thank you.
Please come
Public
and
comment,
stand.
please. You know the rules, you state your name and your address. I don't mean it because you're coming up. I mean, everybody's same familiar faces all the time.
Yeah, I know. Stephen Jeffrey, 128 France Road. I just have some concerns about the costs of the culvert that Barrington has put in. I used to work for FEMA in the HMGP program, as well as an environmental inspector. I've reviewed thousands of culverts. I've gone out and visited hundreds of culverts. And it's my feeling these costs are excessive. I brought in some examples, and admittedly they're dated, but Durham had one project on Mill Road and Mill Pond Road, one precast arch culvert and another reconstruction of a granite abutment bridge. Total cost $200,000.
Who's the engineers?
I don't know who the engineers are. I don't need this stuff with you.
Give it to the
All right.
deputy and Nancy, we can put it in the file, please.
I brought in some of my own pictures that are done recently, if you want to see what it looks like today.
If you leave those with us, thank you.
I will. There's a project in Alton, done by Du Bois and King. 72-ton load rating bridge, 36-foot span, it's arch culvert. 2012, $335,000 total. There's a company out of Vermont. For $1.5 million, they'll do bridges and culverts that span up to 200 feet. I got some line item costs from 2010. Some arch culvert quotes for 2014. 18-foot span, 36 feet long, 4 wing walls footers. The culvert itself is $100,000, 50 to 70K for installation. I'm assuming there's engineering involved in all of this. It's another one, natural stream bed, bottomless arch culvert, $111,000. It's got a 22-foot span. Typically, the manufacturers of these arch systems, one of the benefits is they can be installed in one day. On the Young Road culvert, I asked why it was so expensive. And I was told it was for mobilization and to have the contractors, the various contractors available. When I asked why it took so long, they said it was because the contractors were on other jobs. Now, I never saw a culvert that took a month to put in all my years working for FEMA. And on another subject, I think the town needs to have a written policy on how they address code violations. And I brought you an example from Wolfboro. It's a flow chart. And I don't think the town should be taking legal action against their citizens without evidence.
Mr. Jeffries, I thank you for your comments.
Yep.
And we'll look into those, but I just want to say, as the other part, we have followed the compliance of going out for bid on the project.
Oh, I understand.
But I appreciate your comments. Thank you very much.
There may be some reasons why it's still too expensive.
Yes, that was part of the discussion tonight. Anybody else with public comments, please? State. Again, you know the rules.
Steve Saunders, Bass Road. I wanted to talk about something John's prepared to present as his report. I noticed he's talking about the compensation study and getting an RFP prepared for that. Very significant and important task, I believe. And I'm just hoping that it will proceed similarly to what we did with the system replacement, where a committee could be formed, volunteers from the town to bring in some expertise potentially, chaired by, I assume, Chairman Hardekopf, because she's an expert in this area also. And I think that was a very successful way of approaching that. I hope the same approach could be used here.
Again, thank you very much for your comments, Steve. I appreciate it. Is there any other comments, please, from the public? Seeing none, I'll move on. Again, Aaron and Jill, thank you very much for that, and I appreciate you coming here.
Thank you.
Next, we have the review of the minutes from January 28th, 2019, and February 2nd, 2019. I'll take the January 28th minutes first. Is there any comments on that one?
Were there amendments or changes or anything?
Yeah, anything you want to talk about on the 28th minutes?
There are no changes ahead of time.
Okay, I'll make a motion that January 28th, 2019 be accepted as written.
All in favor, say aye. And seconded by Andy. Sorry, sir. Anybody opposed? Motion carries. All right, on to February 2nd.
Same question.
No changes.
No changes, I'll make the same motion as written.
I'll second it.
Andy, or is that one? Oh, February 2nd, yeah. I was sick. I know I was traveling.
Yeah.
I was sick, but I was still traveling.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. Thank you very much. Those two will be there. We take care of that. Have staff reports.
The chamber has gotten back with copies of their application, as well as a clear statement that all Barrington seniors are eligible to apply for the scholarship which they give for the Peeper race, and with that clarification, will the board approve allowing the Peeper race?
Make a motion to approve the allowance of Peeper race.
I would second that.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries. You're all set, John?
Will there be a vote to appoint the Peter Royce as treasurer and Linda Makowitz as tax collector? These are annual appointments that need to be made each year.
Oh, you?
Wait for a motion.
I'll make a move by Mrs. Hatch. I'll second it. Any further discussion? All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Motion carries.
We have the road paving request for proposal, which is very similar to last year. Is there a motion to approve sending that out? We want to get it out in a timely fashion.
Motion to send that out.
We have a motion to send it out. Do I have a second? I'll second for discussion. Comment?
I see a lot of issues with it. On the dates need to be corrected on it, and then the
Which dates need to be corrected?
April 1st. We can get it in before then.
So you would like to have them due before April 1st?
Right, because the budget. Well, the budget goes. We still have the same amount of money. doing last year, so we have extra money, so it's not, it come in before the, town vote.
If you moved them to March 25th, then you would be able to take a vote. That's the first selectmen's meeting after the budget's been approved.
I'm of the opinion that the way the RFP is written is to accomplish the following work up to the following amount of dollars and tonnage, am I saying that correctly?
Yeah, but it's wrong.
And
There's a lot of mistakes within this, we have Fogarty Road, it's calling for grind and base.
No, it doesn't.
The information I got, it does.
the bid says grind and base.
Then you've got the wrong list, or there's a misprint, because Fogey Road is not a grind and base.
It's a wear course.
Fogey Road is a wear.
Yes, Peter, you want to look at this? And maybe,
Wait.
why don't we do one at a time for amendments that you want to see made?
Yeah, I know.
When do you want for a due date?
25th.
Okay, next issue you want to discuss is,
Can we get a motion to vote on that?
why don't we just do all the amendments and see if they're all approved at once?
Okay,
325 for the due date.
That, by the time this goes out, that's gonna leave 5 weeks.
Yeah, they do what, they're bidding right now.
They're only
bidding tonnage.
Okay.
Yeah, that should be enough. Okay, so what's the next issue you want
Is
to
that the only
change?
change? Is that
The
the only
dates
change?
on it, or that, so
Is
then
that the
the, Fogarty Road's wear course, and then verify all the other stuff that they are. And I'd like to see the length and width we've done in the past, so we know what, people look at Edgewood Drive, they know how many feet they're doing.
They mentioned,
Can we have Peter come up and comment on the reason we didn't, we went to this
I was
several
asked to get the total tonnage and all of that stuff, which I did. Every single company will go out there and measure those roads before they send in a quote as to what they think the number should be. This is the way we did it last year, it's the way we did it the year before.
Right.
I mean, I wasn't directed to have all these numbers. I was directed to give the tonnages, all the other stuff, you know, and that's what I did, just as we did last year.
Yeah, this is
Peter, it's
very
not
much
correct
what
to
we
you,
have before.
I'm just saying, apples for apples, we get good numbers, if we give out the things, instead of like the contractor's side, one's gonna go 1,000 feet, one's gonna go 1,200 feet. The price would be different.
And once
No,
I
the price will be the same because they're bidding on tonnage and square yards.
But for
How far they can get with that money might be.
But to verify all that, if all we do is build the same apples for apples, to go in there and look at, make sure the right tonnage was done, we don't have inspectors out there, can't use that word anyway, that's a bad word, every day, we know at the end of the day, if someone, get their slips, they say they put down this many tons, we know it's protecting us, Peter.
We're gonna pay on the basis.
I am there every single day when paving is going on. We also have DuBois and King come in and do inspections at least 3 to 4 times a week. We check temperature, we check depth, we check compaction after, we do all of that. I mean, if we're gonna try to do this correctly and we want to spend the extra money, it boils down to, okay, we don't like what I think or what I believe in, even though I've been doing it for 40 years, we need to hire an engineer to be there the whole time. We can't afford that. We just can't afford that. I mean, I'm sorry, but that's a lot of money to have an engineer stand there all day to do that. And I went out, I was asked to get tonnages, I calculated up all the tonnages, and once they go out, or this goes out, and the companies go and measure the road, I can guarantee you there's not going to be one company that's got the same measurement as I got, or has each other. There's always going to be a 10, 20, 30 foot difference. They're always going to be.
Right, and that's why we went to tonnage. And the fact is, this list is the planned list, but the tonnage is how the bid will be awarded, and then we'll cover as much as you can and do as much as you can. Some roads might take more, some might take less, and you might be able to add a road.
Peter,
Last year we added roads. This year I think we're gonna end up subtracting roads because we're getting into, last year we did more wear courses and overlays. This year we're getting into grinding and you know, base courses and overlays. So I, personally, my opinion, I don't know what the price of pavement is right now. Obviously it's gonna change between now and April or May. I would believe that there's probably a good 2, maybe 3 of those roads that are going to get cut off.
Peter, I'd like for you to just to look at this list of roads you have here and the work needed, like we have Fogarty Roads brought up.
Yeah, I did that.
So the change.
Go ahead if you got the changes.
Yeah, so the only 2 changes made are Wintergreen Drive and Fogarty Road are not grind and base. Both of those are wear course.
And the other thing we do now is before we tried to spread, everybody gets a piece of the pie, you know, West Barrington and East Barrington and North Barrington and South Barrington, given the cost of, I can't think of the word I want to use, mobilization. What we're doing now is we do 3 or 4 roads in the same location, so we're not doubling up or paying more to truck machine away. That's why you see, I call it Speedwell Pines, but it's Woodhaven and Edgewater. We tied in Wintergreen and Quaker because they're within a mile of each other. And then you take Meadowbrook and I call it Stepping Stone, but they're all going to get done because they're all right there. They're, you know, we're not paying for the mobilization. We're going in, we're blowing out that whole section and moving on.
Before you leave, Chris, excuse me, Tracy, please.
So, my only concern is this. Prior to this RFP, what we did was we got bids back. We opened those bids, publicly announced those bids, returned those bids to Peter Cook, asked him to make a recommendation, and took that recommendation. So, moving this to a faster RFP response date isn't going to gain us anything because...
That is. It will gain you 2 weeks.
Okay.
Because if you did it April 1st, you wouldn't be opening them until April 10th, and then he'd be coming back on the 17th or 24th,
okay,
whatever that is.
The reason we had those dates is because we're trying to tie that one and the striping together, so we're not paying double for advertisement. We're not, you know, paying extra for that.
Okay.
And what it does, it also gives us a head start to get started earlier, and then if there's anything else that should need correction and or extra, Peter would have the opportunity to present that to us and we can move from there. So that's why we're there.
But I assume you'll
you have any other questions?
Just when was the change to the wear course on this document provided to, just today? Okay, very good. Thank you.
I got it on my main list.
Okay.
I don't know how it got by me on that list.
Okay, thank you.
I guess my only question is if we change the date on this one, do we need to take a vote from the board to change it so we can do the striping at the same time?
I assume we can make that change by consensus.
Dan, you had the comment? You had your hand up for next comment?
Yeah, well, I don't want, on grinding and base, there's no variance. When you do, and you add your tonnage, everyone's the same. On shim and overlays, there's a difference. But that's what I'm saying. It'll be easier when we go down there, going through there and see who's the cheapest. Someone might be cheaper on their tonnage, but then you look at price, but then you look at tonnage put on that road, they're more expensive.
When we used to do it by road, it became extremely hard to compare apples to apples. It's much easier when you have 5 numbers, you add them up, and that's the low bid. Knowing that as long as the ratio of what you're doing stays the same, you're going to be consistent in your end result. The only time by bidding by quantities doesn't work is when you're doing something where somebody can throw in a low number knowing there's no ledge and ends up with a low bid or something like that. This contract is just fairly straightforward. We've had good luck by bidding it by quantities. That's the reason we bid it by quantities.
Any other comments from the board? So we're going to make that 3 changes, March 25th for the date, and changing 2 roads to wear course.
So we're going to pay early this year? I know we tend to always end up on the back end of the schedule, so.
Hopefully this is gonna help us get out there, get it ready, and get on their list early.
Yeah, but ideally by September 1, it will be all done.
And the plus side is I'm expecting, just based on if anybody follows oil and things like that, based on where the market is going for the summer and where it currently is, and based on the trends I've seen, it's actually trending lower through the summer, so I'm expecting that we actually should get a really good price.
That's because I would hope so also. Dan, you had another question?
If we get it out now, contractors don't know what jobs they have lined up guaranteed. Durham's already been done, they've been done for a month. They're already locked in for their paving and stuff. And when it comes to, on the bottom of every paving thing, wherever the state sets the tar level at, the price can adjust to the state's level. We have no say in it. We could pay extra, we could pay more. When the state sets the rate on the tar for the thing, so it could change.
So is there a motion to put this out for proposal?
And also include the striping change date.
Tracy already.
So there's 4 amendments that I understand taking place with this. So we brought forward a motion, but we're changing the date from April 1st to March 25th.
Yes.
Changing 2 of the line items on wintergreen and probity to read where course, and then
Yes.
in conjunction with this motion, changing the striping date to also run concurrent of March 25th.
Yes.
So that's the motion that I'm making.
And I'll second that.
Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? 5-0.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
The next item has to do with the fire chief's request to establish a tiered call firefighter, part-time firefighter, however you want to label them, rate. We have answered that the 2-hour minimum will not apply. There were a number of questions relating to certification. So I'd like to have if it's all right with you, for the chief to come up to the podium and
Board object?
for discussion on this.
So you object?
No, I don't
Okay.
object. I'm just going to ask that we, please don't try and sell us this. Let's stick to the facts.
Yes.
Chief, could you have, please?
All ears.
Questions for the chief? Tracy?
Chief, it's my understanding that this would fundamentally change a volunteer to an employee. Is that correct?
No.
Can you explain that answer?
I think that the FSLA came back and looked at the 20% rule. And when we don't meet the 20% rule, and for basically, we took the average salary and benefits of a full-time firefighter EMT that we have on staff now, and took that figure and divided by the 20%. And FSLA, if we used a figure of $60,000 for salary and benefits for one full-time employee, that would mean we could pay one person about $12,000 a year before they would trigger over into a part-time employee status. I don't honestly see any one person, based on previous numbers and trends in the last couple of years off the point system, I would be hard-pressed to see anybody making $3,500 to $4,000. Maybe the assistant chiefs, but an average person would make, based on risk call volume in the last few years, I would say that they'd be around the $3,000 range total in a year's time or less.
Great.
Can you estimate for us how many of the current volunteer call firefighters are non-certified firefighters that would be paid at $10.15 an hour?
Probationary firefighters are the ones that would be paid at $10 an hour, and I have 4 of those right now. Non-certified firefighters, you're looking at about 5 of them.
And then you moved to certified and then to EMTs, advanced EMTs?
Yep. Emergency medical technician is the lowest level of EMS, followed by the advanced EMT, followed by a paramedic.
How many do you have?
Dual certified, probably a half a dozen of them. And then...
Now that's the one that's going to be grade 14-1, the certified firefighter and EMT?
Dual certified,
Is that what you mean by dual certified?
Yes.
Okay.
So there's 6 of those. How many EMTs?
8 or 9 of them.
How many advanced EMTs?
5 or 6. And I have 2 paramedics.
Do you have any that are just certified firefighters?
Yes.
How many?
8 or 10. If I could bring back to if you look at down on the bottom of the pay scale, the average of $15.50 an hour, that was based on, I went down through the list, and based on using this scale and where each individual would fall in, and then I average it by the number of employees we have, and that's really where that $15.50 came back at.
If I'm using this scale, I can't see how 1550 becomes the average, because your percentages, you have too many people that are above that $15 an hour threshold where the certified EMT kicks in.
Everything else. You're asking me to pull off the top of my head where people fit into different things, and obviously even by my own admission, because the numbers I'm giving you are off. I don't think I brought that. I don't think I have that paper with me that I had when I sat and figured that out. I don't have that with me. But again, that's really where that 1550 thing came back, was averaging. I took everybody and then averaged it according to the number of people we had.
So what we're getting is the median, not necessarily the average. Okay, so the median is, okay. And then my other question was, I read in detail the differentials that you're proposing. With the differentials, how many of your current job descriptions, and I broke these down by category, require a differential of a CDL license?
Only the people that are allowed to drive the vehicles that are over 10,000 DVW.
So,
which is your tanker and your
2 frontline engines.
so how many of the positions that you have listed, probationary, certified firefighter, non-certified, dual certified, EMT, advanced EMT, paramedics, require a CDL?
None of the just straight up EMTs, advanced EMTs or paramedics require CDL, because they don't operate on the fire side, wouldn't operate any of those vehicles. None of the probationary firefighters would be allowed to drive them, even if they did have a CDL license, and none of the probationary firefighters would. I do have two non-certified firefighters that are driver operators, so they would get that.
Of your certified firefighters, how many are?
Ten maybe.
Can I ask a quick question? What did you say about CDL drivers, anything over 10,000?
Correct, well, whatever the state requires for a CDL license.
The state law, the federal law is anything over 10,000 pounds, you need a medical card up to
26,000.
Right, then once you get at 26,000, that triggers.
Correct.
So
the federal regulations do not require a CDL license for drivers of fire apparatus. The town's policy for better than 25 years has been that we require a CDL license for driving vehicles that would normally require a CDL license, because I don't, as a fire chief, I don't want to put the liability on the town that should somebody drive one of those vehicles without a proper license and get into trouble. Certainly the town has some liability anyway, but the last thing in the world is that the fire chief before me, and myself included, want to do is sit up on a witness stand somewhere and say I said that they were qualified to drive that vehicle, when in my mind, you know, if the state of New Hampshire will give them a CDL license and they have met the minimum requirements to properly pump and operate that vehicle, then through an internal driving program we allow people to drive. We take driving those big trucks seriously.
Dan, you have any other one?
No, I just want to clarify that.
Thank you.
Sorry.
Selectperson Hardekopf, Selectperson Hatch.
So, how many people do you currently have on staff that can command the fire scene?
Including myself, 8.
I'm just looking through your other differentials. Would you say that the majority of the people who can command a fire scene are also the people that are functioning at the higher end of the current scales you're proposing?
The one, you have your lieutenant, so we have 4 lieutenants position, 2 captains position, and assistant chief and chief.
Okay.
By regulation, even if there's not an officer on scene, a senior firefighter would command the scene until such time that an officer arrived on scene or a officer from an outside community. But from our perspective, from the command staff perspective, there's 8.
And of those 8, are 2 of them certified firefighter paramedics?
No.
Okay. Of those 8
Of those 8, there's 1, the assistant chief has an EMS certification. Neither one of the captains are dual certified, and there's 3 out of the 4 lieutenants are dual certified as EMTs.
Okay. So I guess what I'm getting at, Chief, is you're certainly correct that the median of the rate would fall close to what you are proposing your stipend is per hour.
Yeah.
However, in applying these amounts with the differentials to the actual workforce that you have and applying them in how they will be used, I can see clearly that it will be a much higher estimate in cost than what you're proposing.
I believe that looking at how I came up with the numbers was looking at the response numbers, the call numbers over the last 3 years using that point system, and how much money we spent through the system. And then looking at, we didn't spend all the money from the point system over the last couple of years. There was some money left over the last few years. And again, you're asking me to shoot from trying to recall what I requested. I think was a $10,000 increase in that line. I'm comfortable that I can, based on previous numbers, that we can work within that number and stay within budget.
I think from probably part of where Tracy is getting at, and some of where my concern, which I had addressed before on this, is as well, is that, yeah, you may be hitting a median number, but when we start looking at a mean, I agree it's going to be a much higher number, and my concern with that is, with the point system, you're taking a bucket of money per quarter and dividing that out, which means you have a fixed amount no matter what it is that somebody does or doesn't. And with this, there is no fixed amount. It's just going to balloon and grow. Because as you self-described in this, the goal is to get more people involved in it. If they're...
But I, and again, I'm not saying this from a selling standpoint, but it benefits the town if the whole intent behind this program is, one, is to make sure that we're staying within compliance of the federal regulations and state regulations. And John had sent an email out a while ago that he went to a seminar and that, or thing, there was a blog that the state of New Hampshire in particular is not fond of the point system. Isn't that correct, that you had sent me that thing?
Yeah, that was some years ago, I think.
I
don't remember, it wasn't recent.
Oh, points, is that different?
The problem, what the problem had been with the point system was you had to make sure that you weren't discriminating on the basis of, I think you did, you required them to show up for training, and if they were, you had to give points for training if they were showing up for training. And you couldn't not give points if they didn't make a minimum number of calls. So you basically had to give points, you had to, if you were giving points for, say every hour was a point, you had to count every hour. You couldn't say, well, because you didn't make, because the old system, the system that had the problem, as I remember, Chief, correct me if I'm wrong, was that the stipend system, you wouldn't pay a stipend if they didn't make X number of trainings, and if they didn't make a certain percent of calls, correct?
Right.
Yeah,
right.
They wouldn't get any points, and the state said, no, you're going to have, that was the problem we had with the point system, and that was
So we've eliminated
corrected
that.
2 or 3 years ago, yes.
Okay. And so then my other questions with this are, with the current stipend system that you have and volunteer, and by the way, I should say this just for the record, I'm always amazed when people volunteer to do this line of work. Certainly, the volunteers are a large portion of our fire and safety programs here, and so I'm always amazed that people volunteer and give up their time for this. And the fact that you have 41 dedicated, or potentially 42 based on the number you've given me, of people that are volunteering their time to keep Barrington safe. My question is, based on the current stipend program we have and the status of volunteers, is there any reason that you can't, within the parameters of that stipend program, still use a differential for those commanding the fire scene or for those operating your larger trucks?
Well,
I know you don't prefer that, but is there any reason you can't?
well, the issue comes back to is that you'd have to change the value of the point and give more points based on that. And again, I digress, and I apologize for this sounding like I'm trying to sell something. But I'm just going to go back to the certified firefighter as a grade 12 step 2. The vast majority at $15.02 an hour, the vast majority of the people that fit into that category, we've been paying them $15 a point for the last number of years. Now, if you add the CDL license to the guys that have it, you're going to pay them $15.77 an hour, but it's not all of them. There's, again, I apologize if I had a list of people in front of me, I could look and say, yeah, these are drivers, these aren't. If you look at the $15.02 an hour for certified EMT, so the people on the EMS side that are the vast majority of our responders are certified EMTs, that's all they're going to get. There's no other, I don't have any kind of an officer type structure within the EMS side because there's no need for it. The higher ranking EMT takes control of the scene, and most of the time it's one or two people. If it's a mass casualty type event, the fire department's there, and myself or the assistant chief or captain would be taking it. So you can see that I really base this, this is really based on staying around that $15 an hour figure. And again, I think I've matched my numbers well enough that I actually anticipate that implement this program, we won't use the whole $50,000. I think that, you know, once we get it in place, it will take, we'll have to look at a 3-year average to get a good idea of the call volume and the amount of money we're spending. But I didn't, you know, I put a lot of effort into this and in moving in this direction, and I think that, you know, again, I'm comfortable with my numbers that we're going to be okay.
Let me ask you a question, board members here, and Tracy, you got to tell us what's legal. Why couldn't we put a sunset clause on this? Put it in for a certain amount of time and reevaluate. If it doesn't work, go back to the other system.
It's hard to take money away from people.
No, that's what I'm saying right now.
There's no going backwards.
No, I will. Why couldn't we?
Well, because quite frankly, I don't want to be tarred and feathered, Chairperson Bailey. I would not appreciate increasing someone's rate of pay for hard work for a year and then saying, you know what, we've thought about this, it costs too much. Nah, I wouldn't want to.
All right, then the other aspect that we're coming to, I'm sorry, I'll give you a minute. The other part is coming to that we have the department head before us telling us he can make it work. And I realize we've questioned him right down to probably to his socks. And I mean, as far as I'm concerned, I'm willing to go that way. Oh. Andy, you had a comment.
Yeah, so I believe if I remember correctly, the EMT calls were between 600 and 900 calls a year.
EMS calls run about 700. I think last year we rough numbers 650. The year before that 687. So we run 650 to 700 ambulance calls, and then the fire calls run between. I think we had around 322 this year. Last year was a little over 400. What plays into that most of the time that changes that number around is if we have a storm event that requires a lot of response, like a windstorm, thunderstorm, something like that. That will skew the numbers.
So between fire and ambulance calls, we can expect that we're going to see on average a minimum of 3 calls a day.
Correct. And now understand this, during the daytime, which is why you have 3 paid staff on there, we never pick an EMT up during the day. It's the day staff is on the EMS, and typically for fire calls during the day, we're lucky to get 2 people that come in outside the paid staff. I mean, that's the fact of why we're at where we're at.
John, and you also have the EMTs on the weekend that are paid part-time, so you're not using call EMT during the days on the weekend either, correct?
Right. So the EMTs that may be around during the day on the weekends right now with the current system, it requires a Delta level call for them to respond, or a second tone. And so the idea is that if we're just going somewhere for somebody has a bellyache and needs a ride to the hospital, we're not bringing extra people in for that. I do allow the EMTs have a little bit of flexibility, but they understand that they have to justify their response. Now, if we get a call for a Delta level possible cardiac arrest, or we do have a working cardiac arrest, or we have a motor vehicle accident with multiple patients, then those are triggers to allow anybody that's available to respond. Those numbers are relatively small in the grand scheme of things, so we do have triggers in place that we're not looking to have, 10 or 12 EMTs coming out to cover calls that don't require that number of people.
Will the state retirement system under the Equal Pay Act kick in if one of these now part-time employees work 32 hours on average per week. 35. So let me ask you, so we've changed their status and someone has finished their career with another department, so they're readily available to us and they begin to contribute to 35 hours per week. Do they then become eligible for the New Hampshire retirement system?
Well, that's a slightly different question than I thought you were asking. If it's a person collecting state retirement.
That's not what I'm asking.
Okay, so it's a person that.
Will anything trigger New Hampshire retirement benefits for these employees? Anything?
Averaging 35 hours a week.
Thank you. So that's one potential roadblock I see.
What was the retirement piece you started down?
So this is if they're retired, they can work.
If they're retired, then they're limited to 12 or 1,300 hours a year that they can work. And if they go over that, it's not us that gets hit, it's them that lose half their retirement basically the following year.
If I may, on the retirement, because I had a pretty long talk with the labor attorney about that, and we would have to be able to show that they're averaging more than 35 hours a week, and I could not picture I couldn't even fathom any kind of a situation where anybody, we don't have the kind of call volume that would allow somebody to put that kind of hours in, short of a natural disaster in which, like the Mother's Day floods or a severe windstorm or hurricane or something where we were putting crews on for 10 or 12 hours at a time, do 12 hours, but again, it would never be an average, it would never make it. The important thing to understand is that I realize that, we're paying these people somewhere right now, that the budget line was somewhere in the $35,000 to $36,000 range in the last 3 years to cover all the non-part-time employees. And what I did was I think we had $40,000 budget, we were spending the low 30s. I asked for an extra 10 because of the number is I just don't know how many calls we're going to have next year. We throw a dartboard at the fact that we could have more calls or less calls, and obviously if we have less calls, we won't spend as much money. I think the unknown in this thing is that, making sure my numbers on a 3-year average, it'll be harder to justify to the budget committee and the board of selectmen that to give me a solid number there until we can look at a 3-year average and say, okay, we've been averaging 50,000, so that's a reasonable number. Again, I think we're good with the number. I'm comfortable. I've crunched the numbers enough. I don't see us going over budget. And those of you folks that know me, the last thing in the world I'm going to do is come in. It would bother me more to come and ask you folks for more money than it would be for you to stand there and say, what are you doing here asking for more money? I would, I work within my budget. I have certain large ticket expenditures such as protective gear and equipment purchases and stuff that I wait till the very end of the year, because if I break something on a fire truck or an ambulance or something that's going to be expensive, I want to be able to do it within my own means and not come to you. So.
I have 2 more questions. In reference to, say, for instance, if you have an assistant chief who's also a certified EMT, and this individual's moving from $15 per hour stipend to $17.93 per hour, would you expect that 20% increase for that individual would encourage them to report more often?
No, he covers as much as he can now. He's a very dedicated EMT, and he's a very dedicated firefighter. He is one of the few that I would expect. The people that I'm expecting or I'm hoping will respond to more calls are the people that are going to fall in that $15 an hour range, the ones that are sitting there going, yeah, I'll let the chief take care of it, I'll let somebody else take care of it. The assistant chief isn't one of those. I don't see him covering any more calls than he does right now.
My other question was, how do you plan on working with the Human Resource Department to indicate who holds what certifications and tracking that those certifications stay intact?
So on the fire side, you don't lose your certifications. Once you have them, you have them. On the EMS side, they have to be renewed every 2 years, and if you don't renew them every 2 years, you don't have a license, and if you don't have a license, you're no longer responding. We have to track that. We track CPR cards and stuff like that. So we actually have bigger problems with the state of New Hampshire if we allow an EMT to respond that has let their licensure lapse. I have bigger issues with the state than I do making sure that somebody's getting paid, not getting paid for something that they shouldn't be getting paid for.
John? Oh,
I'm listening
saw
to
you
this
move,
discussion. No, I was just
So,
getting stiff here.
another call department, Avalon, New Jersey, utilizes a length of service program award with their stipend, and based on people's years of experience, they clearly gain more knowledge simply by spending more time in their role. Have you considered creating a stipend program that rewarded maybe those who have hit a 3-year mark, 6-year mark, 10-year mark, something like that, under a length of service program?
I haven't, because there's a cost associated with it. I think too that part of the issue is you know, whether you do it in the length of service and give somebody a bonus or a stipend or whatever at the end of the year because they meet certain milestones, is much along the same lines. We were paying. When we started this program, we were paying the stipends. Everybody got them in December, so everybody worked all year for free. And I shouldn't say free, but they worked all year and got their points at the end of the year. And we found that people were like, well, geez, if I got to wait till December to get paid, then you know, they don't tend to make as many calls at the beginning. They start to bulk up at the end. So then we moved over to a quarterly. Did it quarterly. That helped a little bit, and then when we changed the EMS around to EMS on-call paid monthly, we garnered a little bit more support. And really, what I'm hoping that how this system is going to benefit is that people will say, "Geez, I got a check for $75 or $100 this week," or at the end of the month, I got a couple $100, and though they're not going to get rich from it, they start to like getting that $200 check or $300 check or whatever it is, and they'll respond to more calls. And again, that's really, if I can get more response based on getting paid more regularly and saying, hey, this is a nice little check for a part-time deal, that they'll be, you know, when we need them, that's the only time they're going to come out, is when we need them, that they, you know, then I'll be able to call it a success. If I look, you know, if we look at this afterwards and realize that it really didn't provide what, you know, it didn't provide the end result that I'm looking for, then we're going to have to look at other stuff. And again, I've said this a million times, it's, you know, my preference would be to have a large number of dedicated responders that meet these calls, so that if I can do that, then we're not going to hire people, and, you know, that ultimately saves all of us.
Dan, you had a question, please?
Yeah, can I excuse you 2 minutes?
Certainly. I would like to move this on, so if we have a few more questions, I'd appreciate it. Tracy?
So have you gotten approval from the New Hampshire Department of Labor to pay less frequently than weekly for these individuals once they become employees?
I'm sorry.
Did you get written approval from the New Hampshire Department of Labor to not pay these employees on a weekly basis?
I have not yet, because I haven't applied for it. I was waiting to get approval from this board. Should the Department of Labor not approve it, then we'll pay them weekly. I have every faith that the Department of Labor will approve it, because they did approve it for the EMS on-call program.
Would you be willing to accept a one-year contingency that if this program costs more than 9% per average, we go back to a stipend program?
9% of what?
What it's currently costing per hour.
How much is that 9%?
Yeah, what's that?
The average would be that you were paying $16.42 per hour.
1642 is 9%.
From 15.
I would prefer that you revisited this next year to see if we feel, based on looking at data, that it's meeting the requirements, because the problem is that if the fallacy with the 9% is that if this does exactly like I want it to and fosters more response, and you're holding over my head the number of, I don't know how many calls we're going to have, that if that number could go beyond the 9%, and I might not have any control over it.
Right. What if we looked at it from a pro rata share of the number of calls compared to the prior year, and it was over 9%?
We would go back to tar and feather, wouldn't we?
Well, if we're gonna put something through without absolutely analyzing the numbers of who's responding, how often they're responding, and what it's going to cost, then I think that we need to function in a way that's very responsible and say, let's test this, and if we exceed 9% that we're expecting, we go right back to our stipend program.
Same thing as I discussed earlier, putting a sunset on it.
But
Either way.
I think the right thing to do is to look at it, because if for some reason we went over the 9%, and we could justify that it made sense to be there, I think it's hard to take away. And the problem is that if we have a morale issue and the people decide they're not going to respond, now where are we? If I go in and say, hey, well, I gave you guys too much money, and now they're taking it away, and we don't get the people to respond to calls, that's counterproductive. And
I would certainly suggest, Chief, that because we have to bring this issue up in a public setting, that no matter what this board decides, if it is not approved, we're going to have a morale issue, because you just presented your own set of ranges and asked us to approve it, and if we don't approve it, how is that absorbed by the fire department? So I think that ship somewhat sailed.
Again, I would just ask that you look at the...
Chief, how far back do you have records for your stipend payments?
As far back as we've been doing. I don't have them, but I would believe that we could go to the...
So your question was, your comment earlier was around a 3-year average. Could we look at the employees that we have and what certifications they would have and what 3 years worth of payments for them would look like? Which would, based on this scale, which would give us, so we could compare what we paid.
So we could feel comfortable with what we're deciding.
We could compare what we paid in stipend versus what we would have paid in dollar value, and we would have a much better idea of what you're asking us to do, because honestly I feel like I'm being asked to shoot from the hip on it, and I don't feel good about it, and that's been my concern all the way along on this.
Andy, on what you're saying though, is that you would have to go by the points that they got, because every year the dollar value would have changed if you go back that far. So I think we need to find something more over a mean than just the dollars.
No, I'm sure that he's tracked the actual who reported to what scenes and the total number of hours that were paid, because 1 point is an hour for him.
I think the one
caveat is you couldn't go back past the change when they had people working hours they were never paid for because they didn't get enough
Okay, so
points
when
or
was that,
something.
John?
I don't remember the exact date.
I'm sorry, it was,
When we changed from the other system. That's what I'm-
From not having enough points to having enough points when you had to
When you
pay.
didn't have enough points.
How
I
many
don't
years
think it
ago was
more
that?
than 2 years ago at most.
yeah, 2 or 3 years
So we
ago.
could gather 2 years
We
of
could try to
data
get the
based
data.
on the current certifications that we're discussing, and we could average those 2 years based on these new proposed rates with differentials, and know what those 2 years would have cost, and at least come up with, there's a 20% increase, there was a 10% increase based on this.
So you
And I
see it
think that's all we're asking
Yeah,
for.
we'll
So
try
you
to
see
run
your
those
call
numbers.
values.
And I mean, all along, we were presented with, hey, here's what we'd like to do. And again, quite frankly, Chief, it really makes us the bad guy if all of a sudden you're presenting your own salary structure that hasn't been vetted other than by you, and we say no to it. So I want to say yes, but in a responsible way.
I think we can do it. Why don't we try, Chief?
And if I may, and I respect what you're saying, and I spent a lot of time putting numbers together in my budget, looking at averages with what I saw people doing, because the last thing in the world I wanted to do was to come before this board as I get ready to put my budget together next year and have you guys say, Chief, you said $51,000 or whatever was enough to do this, and you were way off on your numbers. That would be extremely embarrassing to me, because it would show that I didn't do my due diligence. And I take very seriously the fact that when you folks ask any of us as department heads to present the budget that we need to run our department, and I can go back and try to put numbers together, but I truly believe my numbers are going to be okay, and I truly believe that I built in enough extra money in that line to be able to say that we're going to be able to stay within that line of the budget, and I believe that in my heart.
My only concern on that like I said, I addressed when we talked about this originally, is it now gets tied in with the graded step program, and you're going to see increases on it every year, which means you're going to see a compounded increase if you figure 3% a year.
But I'm not looking, it was never my intention to do a grade and a step. My intention was that they get the percentage increase they would stay on the grade, the position would hold that grade and step until such time that myself or whatever chief came back to you and said, look, we're falling behind what other area departments are paying their call members. It was not intended that if you're a 14.2 this year, you'll be a 14.3 next year, and you go to a 14.4. If you're 14.2, you're a 14.2.
Right. Unfortunately, though, Chief, because of things like the Equal Pay Act, if you're applying 3% pay increases to every other position in this town except for these firefighters, what are we saying to them? That's demoralizing in and of itself.
You're not adding you're adding a step and a grade, and not everybody is getting both.
We have, in the entire time I've been here, we have never not given a step and a grade to everybody unless they have been at top of scale.
Well, some performance have
Okay, I have never seen, it has never come before us.
Didn't come to you.
There has been a performance issue.
So I think that Selectperson Knapp brought up a very good point, that the best way for us to see if what we are approving has cost beyond the scope of what we think we're approving is to look at 2 years' worth of data.
I mean, ideally, I'd like to
And
see
to approach
an Excel sheet with that
the
all.
state of New Hampshire and get approval for paying the off-cycle. Because ultimately,
My assumption
This-
is they're going
this
to pay
is-
them weekly,
we're now going to pay this weekly.
but that's my assumption.
Because when we talked about stipend, when we talked about changing these rates, we were still talking about monthly.
Yeah. If he can get monthly, okay, but if
We-
not, I'm fine.
We would.
Okay, but again, so it was presented as monthly, and I said, well, how much more work will this make for Lynn in doing payroll on a weekly basis? So,
But
As long as the timesheets get in, we're fine.
But in fairness, that was, my intention was to go monthly, it still is to go monthly, but there's an amount of work for myself and for Lynn, because I have to approve all the timesheets and before she can pay them. So that, my intention was to be able to sit down like I do now with the EMS on the end of the month. I certainly can fill that paperwork out. The policy we have with the EMS, and the state was more than happy with it, is our EMTs know they get paid once a month unless they want to be paid every week. And if they want to be paid every week, they fill a timesheet out, give it to me, and we'll turn it in. To this point, I've had nobody ask to be paid every week, but the state likes that. We have it in writing. They gave the approval that says if we get a complaint, we'll revisit the issue, which is a standard thing they're going to say anyway. But again, I want, if people have a reason to be paid weekly, then I think that if they work, whether as a responding to calls for fire and EMS, or they work in any other department, if they want to be paid on a weekly basis, they're entitled to that. And I don't think my people want that. I think they're perfectly, I think.
it's really not about what we want, it's about whether the state will approve it or not. The very last thing is the 2-hour minimum that applies to full-time employees only. The lawyer is still checking on the Equal Pay Act to see if in fact we can impact just full-time employees with a 2-hour minimum report to work and not part-time and full-time. Is it fair to only respond to those who have full-time budgeted hours with a 2-hour minimum and not to the part-time employees?
Well, as I see it, the key phrase in the personnel plan is not so much full-time as it is they've been working and they're returning, whereas for call firefighters, they're not regularly working, so they're not being called in.
I think the attorney's checking the language to be sure it's defensible.
So why don't we wait until we have both those issues done, one the hours and two the piece, the hours from the state and also from the attorney, those 3 items. Is that what the board is looking to have done for now? Is there anything else you'd like to add to it?
I would very much appreciate if we ever address compensation in a public setting again, that we have as much information as possible. This is the 4th time we've sent the chief back or worked with our attorney, and I feel like it reflects poorly on the select board that we're having to continue to mine information to make an educated decision.
I'm not going to, no comment. Thank you, Chief. Chief, you want to stick around for the next UNH piece? Can you do that?
I'll skip to the, just for information, the UNH Repeater is having trouble. It's there for the Barrington Fire Department and Madbury and Lee. There are issues that it's reaching end of life and it's difficult to get parts for it. It's something that we knew we would have to replace at some point. It's questionable whether it will happen sooner rather than later. I don't know if the chief has anything to add.
So it's strictly at this point from an informational standpoint. There was a problem with the communication side down at UNH. They brought their company in, and we weren't tripping the repeater in Barrington with the portable radios, creating a significant communication issue. We were not tripping with our portables. Mobile radios we were okay with because we were going straight to the Williamson site, but we weren't getting the other side of it. So after a few days of working back and forth, the dispatch supervisor at UNH called me today, said they had fixed the problem, which they did. We had our communications back where we needed it, but they were made aware that this certain pieces of that equipment had reached end of life and needed to be replaced. So I just wanted John to put it on the agenda to give you guys a heads up, because what it may require is that we would come to you folks a little sooner to ask to spend money out of communication capital reserve for parts of that projected $100,000 plus thing. I don't know what equipment is bad down there, and I don't know if the equipment down there is bad, belongs to the university, or if it belongs to the town of Barrington, if it belongs to the 3 communities. So if it's university equipment, then this conversation's for nothing. But again, we're all in agreement that we don't want to purchase a piece of equipment that, when we make the change away from this copper line system, is going to be obsolete. If we have to, if it makes more sense to get away from the copper line now because of what they're going to do down there, then so again, it's information at this point.
Thank you, Chief. You have a question, Dan?
Chief, the repeater we have over here on the tower, they can move up and down the hall.
Yep.
How long is life expectancy on that? Is that
25 or 30 years.
Is that, how much will that serve on our town and everything?
So that repeater covers about 80% of the town. The tower, the antenna, some of the hardware that's here will be fine. And you're asking me way over my head, and I'm going to say that's all copper line, phone line equipment, and when we go from copper line to fiber optic or computer or whatever, some of that equipment would go away and be replaced by newer technology. But the tower and the antenna and the main, the very expensive part of it will be good for the long term.
Thank you.
John, you want to finish, please?
Okay, next item has to do with the RFP for the compensation study. We're collecting samples still, but I had several questions that I wanted answered. First of all, what are the priorities for this study? Is it a wage matrix? Is it internal, external competitiveness and consistency? Is it a benefit study? Is it a full personnel policy review? Is it a job description review? What does the board envision?
Yeah. Go ahead, please.
So I think based on Steve Saunders' response from the Advisory Budget Committee, a couple of things occurred to me in reference to this. I think the Select Board has asked, and certainly we have reviewed and made multiple recommendations to changes to the personnel policy book. I do not believe that you can ever do an appropriate compensation study without doing a full total rewards study, which would include benefits. That's my opinion. You need to compare apples to apples. If we have a far richer benefits program, then that should be offset by compensation, and you should be looking at total rewards percentage. I'm not... External competitiveness is an interesting term, and I'll tell you why. Certainly someone with a skill set, I'll use someone who handles your HR, for instance. Certainly someone with a skill set who's certified in human resources has the opportunity to take that job from this level to this level and anywhere in between. So when I think of external competitiveness, certainly when I conduct a study, I look at parity for positions and I assign a percentage to that position. But that takes certainly sitting down, looking at the job descriptions and discussing that with a consultant as they're reviewing other positions to look at like for like. I asked how many positions you were considering, and I think 35 was the number. In reference to, seasonal work for the rec department, I do not actually believe you need to go crazy studying what. Yeah. So if 35 is your number, there's absolutely no reason that you wouldn't study the positions for internal consistency if you're only comparing 35 positions. You take a 10-point factor system, you apply the number of direct reports, the actual effectiveness of impact to revenue or money. They're very, a 10-factor score is not a difficult thing with 35 positions to apply. Required amount of education for the job, required amount of experience. Those factors are not hard to to vet out in each of the positions. You probably, if you're updating all the job descriptions, have them listed, and we have discussed that you are updating all the job descriptions, which is great, because you would want to do that before any study. I don't think this is going to cost an outrageous amount of money. That said, there have been a few studies already conducted by other like-sized towns, but my guess is that you structure the work and the operations within this town differently than some other towns. And so you may find that there are up to 10 or 15 positions that are titled in a different way or utilized where the essential position functions don't necessarily match the responsibilities of those other towns. The only people, other than a true certified HR person that knows what these jobs do, are you and the employees. So if you've had the employees update the job descriptions and your essential position functions are correct, and you've reviewed them and assigned to them the requirements that you feel are needed for each position, then ultimately you could sit down with a group. And I can't imagine this would cost more than $10,000. And if it did, I'd be shocked and tell you that you're getting ripped off over 35 positions.
So you're not comparing to other communities or organizations?
Well, here, if you choose to do that, should you choose to, let me give you an example. Let's pull Chief Walker into this. Chief Walker has how many direct reports? Well, 48 potentially. He's not just managing his full and part-time employees, he's also managing the performance, the training, and the review of 42 call volunteer firefighters. So you would compare that to another fire chief who has a like structure like that, as opposed to potentially a fire chief who has 48 full-time employees.
Right.
So this is what I'm saying, that's something you're going to have to look for parity on in every position.
Right, but do you want to search out comparable communities?
Well, what will happen when you hire someone is they will send out the study that they put together, and the study will say total revenue for that town, total number of populace in that town, total number of direct reports for that job, and it will begin to pull that information together as part of the study and apply that parity percentage.
But I thought you said not to look at external competitiveness at the beginning of what you were saying.
There's external competitiveness is the town administrator has to know fund accounting. What does a fund accountant get paid? Can we transfer Connor to a position where he does fund accounting? Probably after a few years of this job we could. The external competitiveness is to look for other like positions that the employee could likely transfer to with their skill sets and essential position functions of experience.
Okay, that's not how I meant the term, but if that's how you use it, then I understand.
Would I want to look at every town administrator and say, what do they get paid? No, I would want to look at town administrators with about the same revenue, and about the same number of direct reports, and about the same number of populace within the town.
Yeah, that's question number 3 here.
But that's designing a study, and I think Steve's point is, in what you want in this study, he's suggesting you pull together a small committee, look at that. It shouldn't be me who decides what's on here just because it's something I know about. So I think that he may be onto something where there's enough people. Andy probably reviews. I know George has had oversight of a lot of employees. This is something you might want to consider.
I agree with her.
Are you looking at just communities nearby or communities throughout the state?
Well, again, you could use communities in Colorado for all I care, and then you look at the difference in what the actual cost of living is in Colorado and wages in Colorado compared to here on the occupational index. Which, by the way, Andy, it was a very good idea. Just so you know, the state's fueled by the occupational index from the feds. So Bureau of Labor Statistics gathers all that and then tells us all New Hampshire will pay 15% less than, metropolitan Boston. So that's all there for us, and any good compensation analyst will look at that.
But I'm still not clear on what the RFQ is going to look like.
That's why you want a committee.
Yeah, let's have the committee. I understand some of our technical words, but that we need to look at this. And I don't, go to other communities and stuff, we gotta look at what viewpoints from our community, our needs. And I can't speak about the fancy what she does, but I know we need to address this.
Is there a motion to form a committee?
I'll make the motion.
Motion, second.
I'd second it.
Further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Who here wants to volunteer for the committee? I need two of us.
Minutes and posting.
Doesn't work that way.
I've had enough committees.
I would certainly volunteer my time.
We have one, anybody else want to do it?
George, you're educated.
No, I have
Andy's got his
outside.
hand up.
Oh, Andy, oh, fantastic.
I think that we could pull Stephen as well.
Steve, are you
Really
willing to do
appreciate
it?
that.
I am.
All right, so that gives us three. I think that's enough.
What do you want for staff?
Should I have my divorce papers sent?
Yeah, I'll give you
Why don't we,
that. I was just
can
gonna
we
say,
pull Connor
to
in,
get
since he's gonna
certified.
be leading all of the people under this new range structure?
Who was that, please?
Honors are four.
I think that's appropriate.
We can go from there. Because I had asked to have all
Since
the
I can never
jobs.
make rec department meetings, I should probably participate. I'm sorry to laugh at that.
But it's just like I'd asked Connor earlier, that we should have had the employees review their own job descriptions and hand them in as a prelude to this committee.
So we had suggested, or I had suggested to Connor and John probably a month or so back, that the beginning of readying for this is that every time you perform an annual review, you're handing the employee their job, asking them to update their essential position functions, include what they are currently doing, because oftentimes organically jobs grow. And also with changes in technology, essential position functions become obsolete. So the employee would update it, and then it would be reviewed by the supervisor for approval.
And, well, does the supervisor approve it, or are they all coming to the selectmen?
No, the supervisor approves it. I don't know what the tax collector's doing. The supervisor knows what the tax collector's doing.
They should.
For
So the
sure.
only ones that will come to the selectmen will be department heads.
I would say yes.
Is that in the committee? Yeah,
Yes.
worked it all out with her. So if you, please, you gotta go to the microphone.
We gotta get you closed captioned, Steve.
Okay, so that, since I will participate in the committee, that's fine. One additional information that I would request of the department heads is who they see as their labor market. Where would they advertise to get people for that
Good
position
idea, very
that
good.
they've got there?
Thank you, good. Everybody satisfied with this, so we can move on?
Yep.
Thank you, John?
The recreation plan from SELT for Chestnut Forest has come back. Does the board have any comments on the proposed
Did we
plan?
print that?
I printed it, it's like 40 pages.
Oh, yeah, I saw that.
Excuse me, that's
I said, I
Stonehouse
don't
Forest.
think I'm going to go.
Yeah.
Stonehouse Forest, not Chestnut.
Yeah, you're wrong.
Stonehouse, sorry.
The one that was 26.
Does it limit,
Anybody-
I have to ask, does it limit hunting? Does it limit ATV usage? Does it
Yeah.
limit
Yes.
the
Yes.
town road usage?
Yes.
It doesn't refer to.
Then
town
I don't
road.
approve it.
It doesn't address town road.
Does it address hunting?
Has
Has anyone read the 40-page document?
I read about 70% of it.
So I would ask to table
A lot
this
of-
until I've done due diligence.
A lot of
on
this is put down for logging.
It's subject to change.
There was definitely some language in it that,
They'll modify the plan.
that I definitely did not agree with the chairman. Unfortunately, I lost my edited copy.
Why don't you get me comments for the next meeting?
I had gone through it and been making track changes, comments. Currently, I closed it and saving it.
I'm looking to see when it was sent because.
I suspect they have fishing game money, so they have to allow
2-7.
hunting.
No, so they definitely allow hunting and fishing, but Fish and Game is reviewing this concurrently.
Well, and there are some structured limitations on how they do it, the times that it's allowed, the
Oh, and this was the one,
When
yeah.
it's open, when it's closed.
Page 17 is where they allow hunting and
But
fishing.
you see, this, mine says November 14th of 2018. And the other pages are updated to November 15th, so it took this long for state to approve it. I think we should give some more time to it to look at it.
And the parking's not installed, extra parking.
That's right, there's no parking on
That's
here.
true, there is
anything
no
else.
parking. Can we request that SELT tell us, I just need the bullet point version, like, what did you change?
They
What-
do glad to come in.
Great, I want to know what was happening and what you're asking to limit happening.
It's great for them to come in, but like a marked up of what is
Yeah.
different.
Yeah, if we're saying you, no, at some point, I remember SELT coming before us and telling us that they were going to change some of the recreational behaviors that take place at Stonehouse Pond. And for instance, I do believe something to do with fishing, either during the hours of this or fishing itself was going to be affected. And I would like to know point blank, where are we at and what are you proposing changes?
But
This
they
shouldn't affect
did,
the pond. This is just for the forest, which does not include the pond.
So there's no changes in fishing at all in that
There's
document?
changes in parking related to the fishing. But this is fishing on this land here, so
How can there be changes in parking
There's
related to fishing if there's no fishing?
that not to allow anybody who isn't fishing to park there. That's what I heard they were going to do.
Park at the pond?
Right.
yeah, so in other words, you can't go there to look at, you have to go there to fish.
That's ridiculous.
Excuse me?
Do you know how many people go there and take beautiful fall foliage photos because of the reflection onto the water?
Yeah.
We can't limit that. So we need due diligence.
Maybe
on
we
this.
all need a
Excuse me?
Mr. Go ahead, Don, please.
I was just gonna say, maybe we pull good.
Hand that to Don.
Dan, you have a comment?
You guys are, this is a huge piece of property. There's many streams and brooks and ponds that are there, not around someone else, the whole thing. And they came and said, they're gonna do, near Hearthside, there's open, and there's a gate there. They said there's 8 to 12 spaces there. There's entrances off Mary Hill Road, there's a gate there. They're gonna say they're gonna do 8 to 12 spaces there. And then you have the Stonehouse Forest itself. So how can they say, they haven't got them done yet? And then they wanted, at end of March Road, they wanted that quarter-acre lot to put parking there. They said, we didn't want to give it up. And they said, well,
Right, John had a public meltdown.
That's not how I would say that.
I wouldn't say so.
Sorry. He
Concern.
expressed complete and utter displeasure.
but basically, all that land,
Is that in?
they did a lot of talking, and I haven't seen it yet. And so they need all this stuff put together,
Yeah,
when they
nothing else
talk
is
about
happening.
them, all this come forth.
So I think
To answer your
Selectperson
question-
Ayer is right. We should.
To answer your question on hunting, there is a section in here on hunting that talks about putting the tree stand and everything else up on there if it's necessary, whatever. But there is a limitation of the tree stand being permanently installed. That's part that can't be, but there is a good section there that you can read. You'll see.
And
Yeah, it's in the allowed uses.
Well, I think Selectperson Ayer is bringing up an important point. We should probably not proceed with approving a recreational plan until all of the parking that would precede any recreational behavior is in place.
At the same time, I would recommend you make a recommendation for the original plan that when everybody signed on for what it was going to do, to make sure that those were not eliminated in their plan that they have before us now.
Okay.
So there are questions that I have, like, allowed only with permission from SELT metal detectors for scientific or historic research.
Yeah, there's that stuff, yeah.
Just geocaching, 30 days in advance, collecting of any kind.
I think some of
You
this
can't pick up rocks.
stuff I was gonna say would make
You
good.
can't see, when your kids go, you gotta empty their pockets.
I don't agree with all
You gotta
that
get
stuff.
twists.
This is,
It's like,
It is everyone.
and why should a selected few tell you what it can be used for?
Because they're the ones who have, the SELT owns it, so they can make the rules.
Well, that, see, I didn't ever, when I was on the Conservation Commission, I didn't support giving everything to everybody. I never did.
I understand why.
I was the same way. We had a lot of discussions on this.
John and
You'd
I
probably
had
be
many,
unhappy to know that there's no
I
trapping
did.
for me.
You know what?
Trapping and baiting.
You can't shoot bear over bait,
That's in there
or
as
shoot
well.
them with dogs.
Hold on, there's beaver problem out there that could, might have to be trapped.
Good luck with that.
Why?
No trapping or baiting.
It's not baiting and trapping out there. It's right in there.
Fishing game, if it's a
I lost my other.
public safety.
but you know, conservationists are great people, but they don't rule the world. Oh, I can get so
That's why.
aggravated with stuff like this.
When that change?
So everybody is in agreement that we're going to postpone this to another meeting. We're going to sit down and we're going to ask John to try to get SELT to come in 4 weeks?
Yeah, and be
Right.
open-minded.
I just would like to see, this is how things are currently, and this is what they're asking for restrictions.
So,
So 2 weeks and 4 weeks.
and so John, if you could turn around and get us the original document that we all signed on for, that they wrote this from, I would appreciate it.
They had
Which-
two parts.
no, what you mean is the
Stay
easement
all
document?
day.
Yeah, the easement document, yeah.
Okay.
That's the next word to use, thank you.
They had the
Yeah.
two parking areas. They stated, but they have not done anything.
Because I'll come first thing in the morning.
They have to make sure that
Him?
the big
This
gripe
one?
that we have that I
No,
brought up is
Chairperson.
that it has to be accessible for the fire department.
Oh, you want to
Should they
stand
need
in
to do
for
a
us
rescue?
if we need somebody?
That's one of the reasons they're going to give them the key.
Worked out well last time.
I don't think we should have a locked gate.
I don't either. We already said no to that. That's before the voters right now.
Well,
Actually,
Is there any other
may-
material anybody wants on that?
May I quickly ask Chief Walker a question?
Go ahead.
Chief, there are six, that I know of, at least six locked gates on what were once Class 6 roads and are now Class A trails. Does your fire department have keys to those gates and know where they're located so that should there be a fire in any of those conserved areas, you can easily get a truck out there?
They have a master.
That's right.
Oh, no, I'd like to know.
well, I have a question if they're really Class A trails, because the Class A statute didn't come in until 1993, and it required a town meeting vote. There's only been one voted by the town.
Okay.
The long and the short of it is that these gated areas are on the Tamposi property. They're not easily accessible with a bolt cutter. They were built in such a way so the lock's up inside, so that an average person cannot go in with a bolt cutter and cut it off. The highway department is usually the one that changes the locks, and for the most part have been very good about getting us keys to that, in which case we keep a key on the forestry truck. But being the fact that everybody's human beings and there's a chance that a lock could have got changed at some point and not have a matching key, I wouldn't stand here right now and tell you that there's no possible way there's a gate key. I'll just offer my opinion on this. When we gate these things and we don't maintain these roads and we encourage people to go out walking and hiking and doing passive recreation out there, they've never taken into consideration that when somebody gets hurt, that at that point they depend on the fire department to go in and get them. And that comment came up at town meeting last week when I said if you're going to put a bike trail in, it's got to be wide enough so that we can get an emergency vehicle, and if somebody gets hurt out in the middle of that thing. And somebody stood up after and said, well, they don't do that in the White Mountains, so I don't know why we got to do it here in Barrington. Well, the people that hike the White Mountains are different than the people that are going to walk around in the woods in your local community. And the problem is people, they don't want to wait a couple hours when they're hurt. They want somebody to come get them right now. And so, myself included, I'll stand here and tell you right in front of God and everybody, I don't care if the ambulance is 20 minutes away because I don't need it right now. But if I'm laying on the floor having a heart attack, I want it in the driveway out there. And same with police or the fire department. So it's hard to sit here and say, because you don't need a particular service right now, I don't care if the town provides it. But if you get out in the middle of them woods and you're lost, that's when you want that police officer coming in by helicopter or whatever to walk out. So you guys know my position. We conserve all this land, and then you don't provide the funding. And I believe, I'll say it publicly, I believe that money ought to be coming out of that conservation fund to buy a side-by-side or a 4x4 or whatever, so that police or fire can get into these places to get to the people. And it shouldn't be me budgeting through my budget to do that. So I know that was a little bit more.
Well, I'm sure that Mr. Ayer will bring your comments up to the next meeting he attends for us. Dan, you have a comment?
No, I brought this up before in the past. I don't care. Build it, they will count. That day the guy went out and sewed on his floors and blew his head out, committed suicide. You know how much that cost other towns? Out of their budget? There's fire department's budget, police budget. That was an expensive day. And other towns pay for it. So now the White Mountains, they're charging people. If you go over there for people also, if you weren't prepared for it, the state will go back on you for these rescues.
Or you can buy a hiker's card or one for $25 that provides essentially a level of insurance to protect you from that.
Okay, next item, I got figures on the cost of Beauty Hill Road improvements, 3 estimates, one at 334, one at 554, and one at 976. Peter had talked to Du Bois and King, and they provided these numbers. The cost for a bike trail was estimated at $529,000 a mile.
It's actually cheap, so I found in, I think it was Connecticut, 2.7 miles of bike trail cost $5 million to put in. I couldn't believe it.
Bike trails are very expensive.
2.7 miles, $5 million.
And the last thing I have, committee and appointments, 2 planning board members, alternates, Conservation Commission, 2 full members and an alternate, ZBA 3 full members and an alternate, ABC 1 full member and an alternate, and Rec Commission 1 full member and an alternate. Some people that currently hold office may be interested in being renewed. So.
Is this on our website?
Volunteer opportunities are on the website.
These particular requirements are on the website.
This list, I assume it's on the clerk's page, but I'll check.
Would you please? Thank you. Any other comments?
Yeah.
Just so I understand, Chairperson Bailey, these appointments that are coming before us in March, are these current members and they have renewals coming up, or these new people we're being presented with?
The answer is going to be both.
Oh, okay, thank you.
And I would recommend that you go to a non-public session to discuss this, and then we would turn around and have a swearing in after that. That would be up to the next chair to make that decision.
Gotcha.
And I do have some non-public stuff.
I'd like to comment, Mr. Chairman.
Please.
I disagreed with engineers, but this information provided here on this, I agree with. As I'd like to bring up a future date. These numbers and stuff.
You're talking about Beauty Hill Road?
Right, yes I am.
Okay, thank you.
Once the budget comes, the estimates come out, I'd like to go back, comment on later. But one thing, option has not been budgeted. We have different projects on Young Road, the culvert, near the boat launch. This road we asked for to be done. Somehow we need to figure in highway budget future jobs. We got to put money away. Because it's expensive. Right now, we get the pavement line and stuff, but we need to save money for the bridge studies. That was running low. We put a little more money in that. But right now, we need to start budgeting the highway garage for projects.
Any other comments on Dan's comments? Well, Dan, I have to agree that we need to find a way to put more money aside. I really do, because if we slam the property owners here in town with a large bill, because we didn't turn around and take that advice with them, we're going to have some, as Tracy says, tar and feather again. So, thank you. Any other comments? Is anybody speaking? Yes.
Peter, I just brought up that we need to start budgeting in the highway department extra money for these projects that are coming up, Young Road,
Yeah,
culverts and stuff like that. He just walked out, he back, so I just wanted to interfere, we spoke about that.
that's good. Is anybody speaking for Suzanne tonight?
I am. So I have the 2 minutes that you approved earlier to be signed. I have the oaths of office for Linda and Peter to be signed. I have a elderly exemption denial because of too high of income to be signed, similar to the last meeting. The applicant's already been notified, but denials need to be signed by the board. I also have a bank had issued an escrow payment for taxes to the town and referenced the wrong map and lot. And it was a mistake on their part, but also a mistake on our part to the extent that we didn't pick up on it. So that happened for 1.5 years where they were basically paying somebody else's taxes. So the taxes have all been taken care of, the principal payments have been moved, but the payment account that the payment should have been going to has accumulated $1,100 worth of interest and penalties because the payment was moved to the wrong place. So only the board can abate those taxes, so there's a request to abate those taxes for a shared mistake between that bank and the tax collector.
And just so I understand, you're not saying abate the taxes, you're saying abate the interest and penalty earned on the taxes paid to the account, but they were paid on time each time.
Yes.
Yes.
So I would make a motion then to waive the interest and penalties of the $1,100 on the incorrectly designated property as long as all taxes were paid on time for the correct property.
Second.
Second, any further discussion on that?
Well, yes, I got a discussion. How was it not triggered? Now, on both properties were paid.
Well, it's not unusual for us to get paid twice for the same property. So what happened is when it came in, the money was sent back saying it had already been paid for the other property. So therefore...
So now, was that sent back to the bank or sent back to the homeowner?
Sent back to the bank. The taxes have all been taken, the banks have straightened out the taxes. It's the interest on the tax.
Interest and penalties.
Interest and penalties that we need to get waived.
So we're not waiving any taxes, we're just waiving interest
correct.
and penalties because quite frankly, we don't watch it either.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries.
As I remember, it was a well-known bank for mistakes.
Oh, really?
Okay, last thing.
Nationally, it's in the
You
news.
could like tell us
Hey,
later.
one more thing.
Yeah.
Last thing that I have is, there's also a payroll manifest dated February 7th and the AP manifest dated also February 7th to be signed. And then now, honestly, the last thing I have, so we've talked about messaging and getting information out about voting and specifically the town hall project. The two things that I've brought up on a couple of occasions is one, a mailer to the residents of Barrington like the select boards have done in the past, and also a sign out in front of the proposed lot for information purposes. So I did some research about what it would cost to do a mailer. This is an example of a mailer that the select board's done in the past. So to send something like this out to every commercial and residential endpoint in town would be about $1,500 to $1,800, about this size. The opportunities to limit that cost are slim. There's some cost savings that we could do by counting ourselves, but unlikely, they do it with machines, and so it's unlikely that we can make up for it in efficiency. So that would be a decision that you folks would have to make on whether or not that cost is worth it. An idea that I have on decent authority that the library is probably planning on sending something out to residents also. I have no reason to believe they'd be interested, but I think it might be worthwhile for the board to make a decision to say, hey, approach the library folks and say, if you'd be willing to fund half the cost, we can do one thing on one side, the other thing on another side, and send one thing out to the residents of Barrington instead of multiple. So I would be willing to pursue that idea if the board was interested in it, but that's your decision.
Actually, it wouldn't be quite half because one side is half of it is taken on by address. So it'd be
And they've changed this a little bit, but
So So because we have 2 warrant articles for one town hall, I think it's going to require a lot more messaging than we think. So while I think it would be very nice to have to co-op together and do this, I don't think it's actually possible in order to effectively communicate what you need to, which is that 2 warrant articles must be approved in order for us to do a zero tax increase town hall build. What is the cost of the large sign that would go on 125?
So I don't have cost estimates for that. I would be definitely interested in indication from the board that you're interested in that, and I'll get numbers.
I would be very
Dan, what was the cost of your large sign, if you don't mind sharing that with the board?
Mike's Signs and Designs, he did my design. He's done a lot of highway, I believe he did the highway to the fire department. He would treat us real well on a sign.
I'll come back to the board with that information. So Tracy, to your point about information, so this is another example of something that a previous board has sent out with information. So this is an opportunity also. The cost difference is only like 5 or 6 cents more per piece. So if you're looking for information heavy,
I'm not looking for over-information heavy.
Okay.
You have produced, and I have attached to Barrington, New Hampshire Connections, the town hall portion of the deliberative session. So 135 people showed up to deliberative session, and last I checked, about 56 people had viewed the video. So less is more. People just need to know the facts. This is going to cost them not a thing, and in the long run will save them money.
great.
So I think that it needs to be messaged without a lot of reading.
Right. So is there, if an equitable way was proposed in a cost-sharing fashion, is there any interest in trying to get more information like the library on this, or just stay straight down?
I'm of the opinion, as much as I support the library bill, that's my personal choice, that we should keep the 2 issues separate. How does everybody else feel?
I feel the same way. Because if you look at the comments that go on the Barrington piece, that they need to have the information. They would like to have some honest information.
Well, and I think that the library's put out some great information. I just think they're
No,
two very different, they're 2 very different projects, and one of them has no impact. And so the last thing I want to do is to muddy the conversation about the town hall because of the zero impact. Sorry, Selectperson.
Thank you.
Understood. So is the board at that price tag of $1,500 to $1,800? Is that, I didn't want to do any more until I knew that that was something the board was interested in.
We have $300,000 worth of history and plans and studies. I think if we don't get this passed before interest rates rise, oh boy.
Okay.
I don't want to spend any money. We're going level funded, but if we do signs, I had 2 comments on my signs I have out this weekend and stuff. So the signs are cheap. We should look into that when we put them in certain locations and stuff. And we don't do town properties. We ask homeowners. That's what I did.
I was thinking one sign. If the board's interested in more signs, like more informational spread around town signs.
So I think having one on the main property, this could be the potential future site of your town hall. Vote on this day.
Right.
But we could also put 2 small ones on either side of Route 9 if we get landowner permission, so that as people are heading to the polls, they
But I
are receiving
think the
some
mailer
messaging.
is going to be our selling point to let people understand.
Zero tax.
It's a
Who's
$0.
gonna donate the money?
I mean, you read some of the comments and you cannot believe where the people receive their information.
Yeah.
I couldn't even dream of places they go.
I would agree with you, Chairperson Bailey. I would make a motion to expend up to $2,000 on the mailer. I anticipate it will be 75% of that, but I would make a motion for that. We have the money in the incident fund, don't we? Okay.
I'll second that. Any further discussion? Seeing none, I'll have a vote. Bailey, aye. Come on.
I don't agree. I don't like spending it, but we've wasted so much money trying to get this done. I think spending $2,000 is like the best $2,000 we can spend.
Thank you.
I support it, I spent it for my own stuff when I ran. I bought things and everything. And it's,
Hardekopf, aye. I'm feeling too cheap, I don't want to spend that to do with money.
What's your vote? No? 4-1 vote carries, thank you.
Okay, thank you. I'll bring
I don't believe
information
you
back.
for feeling that
Yeah,
way.
And you can send out an information email without comment not required.
Oh, okay, yeah, I'll seek feedback from the board between now and next meeting.
Do you have anything else?
$2,000 should go to the flood.
Yeah, $2,000 should allow both the sign and the flyer.
Yeah, should be all right with that.
Yeah.
I can negotiate for you.
You can cross me off the flyer list, save 55 cents.
It's cheaper to send it to everybody.
Oh, okay, sorry.
And it's only like 17 cents, so.
Oh, good.
Be good.
It has to, we'll move on to old business. Now we have the Peeper race. I think everybody's aware that,
We approved that.
okay, that's good. Any other old business?
no, but I would like, last meeting, and I'm not gonna be Rick and talk long. I heard that the only people that could run the race was members of the
Chamber.
chamber.
The award.
I do not think that is right.
That's not accurate.
Inaccurate.
Anybody can run this.
So at
run
one
sign
point,
up and-
what they changed was who could be a recipient of the scholarship, and they've since changed it.
Yeah.
So it was limited.
But I mean, I've had people speak to me about this and think how terrible it is. It's a town thing. It was done for fun years ago. And all of a sudden it became the chamber.
That's fun for you.
Well, yeah, but I was married to a war veteran, and I think if he wanted to run, which he wouldn't, but if he wanted to run that race, I don't think because he's not a member of the chamber, because I know when...
No, anyone can sign up.
When I met him, the reason he joined the chamber, so he was underage and he could go get a beer.
And those are important goals too, though.
I know.
Well, the statute of limitations have run out.
I know. But I mean, I just don't think that that's a town thing, is to have it just for the chamber or the VFW or the Grange or anything like that. Have it be for the people of the town.
We agree.
Any other old business? Seeing none, I'll move on. Anybody have any new business? Seeing that, we don't have any more. Have a selectman's report. Selectman Ayer? Selectperson Ayer, excuse me.
No, I'm a select board. I give up persons. But basically, conservation was a little eventful. But, there's a couple of people who came forth and stuff on Meeting House and stuff. And there's a lot of design going into that roadway, deal with the water and stuff. And they're going to try a new rain garden to deal with the nitrogen and stuff. It's pretty interesting. There was 2 guests there that night. And then town lands, we looked at the management from Hanukkah, and we got a rough draft. We got to modify it, and we get something else up on town lands and stuff. And they are running into problems looking at the restriction and the ownership of these conservation lands and stuff.
Hanukkah is or Barrington?
No,
We're running into problems.
well, there's a lot of people, like, we only own a small percentage of these things. There's other societies and other people put into this. They have say over it.
Okay.
So we have to get their permission to do anything.
But also that if we have further projects come, we want to make sure the town takes control of the town's land instead of giving it to somebody else, even though they do have the knowledge and the equipment and everything else to take care of it. We need to at least talk about that.
So thank you for reminding me of that. But part of the request we're going to put out proposals up, it's going to be broad, so not limited to this. So we get all the information we needed. cover our own properties and ones with the limitations.
Thank you. Selectperson Hardekopf.
I have not attended a rec commission meeting.
Oh, yeah.
Can I get on that committee?
We can change the meeting night.
Oh, yeah.
No, us, we can meet on different nights, so we can make it. They don't want to change the weekend.
There you have it.
It's just, I'm not
What do
gonna
you
go
want
down
me to do?
that- I'm not gonna go down that
You
road.
guys.
Selectman Hatch.
We still haven't had to have a meeting, which is good, because it shows people are going by the rules.
It shows that our zoning rules are actually working the way they're designed.
That's right.
Right, Mr. Knapp.
Absolutely.
So to the planning
Nobody's
board,
picking on Dawn for not going to zoning.
they approved the minutes. There was a request for hiatus is not the right word, but essentially a continuance from Jones and Beach, where they tabled it for Hard Rock. And once they have finished their geohydrological study, then it will come back before the board, then it will come back before the planning board for, to reinstate the application and move forward at that point. There was a lot subdivision on a private road that was reviewed and approved by the board. And then there was also a 3-lot subdivision that was reviewed and approved by the board as well. And then there's a design review set up to be before the board on the 19th.
Thank you.
You do a good job.
You do.
I only have a couple of items here. It shouldn't take us long. One of the items is that I haven't been to the last library meeting. Thank you very much. And so then we can go from there. And the other thing is I had this drawn up by John, so everybody can get an idea when people talk to us about how the money's spent. And the only thing I would say to you is to remember that the school and the school state all go together to give the percentage whoever you add it up, so it's there. I've asked that after the next vote is taken, that we also get something similar, so voters have an understanding of where it's going.
Good idea.
And that's all I have. We have anybody else wants to have public comment, please?
Did I miss something?
Maybe.
I think in the past year I've mentioned this before. If we're going to do any road projects that are beyond what we typically do, those projects should be included in the capital improvements program, and they should be done after we do a study and prioritize. The first item we would want to do is to start doing some traffic counts on some of our busier roads. I've already mentioned that to the regional planning because that's a service they offer to us that is part of our dues. So if the board is beginning to have ideas of roads in which they would like traffic counts collected on, please get those to me. My first thought is we need to start looking at some of our roads, Green Hill, Tolan, Beauty Hill, those roads which connect to some of our state roads, which are more heavily traveled and are used by commuters in our town. That would be my first thought, and that a lot of thought goes into which projects would give the most bang for the buck and are used the most heavily. And also, I just want to mention, I think it was mentioned before, the state of New Hampshire DOT is going to do a safety audit at no cost to the town at the intersection of Beauty Hill and Route 125. It is also my understanding that in 2020, which for DOT starts in July, there will be money available for traffic studies, and the Route 125 corridor has been at the top of the list for a number of years. So it's my hope that they'll start looking at 125 in particular through Barrington. We have a number of projects in the works in this area, and I'd rather them be proactive than reactive to the whole situation.
Can they study that without the other, like, if there isn't a building in place, how would they study, like, our gas station next to?
I think they're going to, the plan for what we've been talking at regional planning for a number of years, they did a study over a decade ago, looking at existing conditions and building in, future growth.
2005 or something.
Yeah, it's become real dated. They've made some improvements along the way, but it's my understanding they'll look at it again. Now, that's not to say each time we get a project that comes in, they don't require traffic studies for that particular corridor, turning movement analysis, whether there's going to be a turning lane, a center turning lane. They look at it then too, but they're actually going to be looking at all of 125 at some point to address growth over the last decades.
Do you think that study would include the traffic circle down there in Lee, and turn around and put something a little bit more sensible?
No.
I got to tell you, I really like that roundabout. Keeps traffic moving, but I know a lot of people have issues
You're in
with
the inside lane and somebody in the outside lane who knows they can turn and go right there in front of you and go towards Durham. I mean, that's frightful.
Roundabouts are the popular item lately, and you're going to see more roundabouts before you see less.
Well, just the way the traffic is designed on it makes it tough.
But if you look at the environmental impacts of a roundabout as well as the outcomes of accidents, they are the environmental impacts are significantly less, and traffic accidents result in significantly less severity.
Swipes.
Right, they end up being swipes, they end up being pushes, you have no head-ons, and you don't have significant T-bone related incidents, which means the severity of injury and outcome are often much less severe with roundabouts than they are with that. I can't even tell you how much studying I did on 20 years ago. That's when I was much younger, hippier individual.
You guys might hate that roundabout. I hate it too, but I live over there. It flows. It's not truck friendly. So when I go in there with a truck and trailer, I just look out for everyone, and I go through it. You gotta look out for other people and stuff. It's not made for a truck, but it does flow. The traffic,
Especially on the 20-foot.
the traffic flow is so much better.
I do have a question on when they redo the 125 study, so they start assessing everything up and down 125. Does that mean when they redo the road, if they find that there are areas that need to be widened or turn lanes, they're going to put those in, or are they going to put safety? Just not.
They're going to start. They start with the study. I mean, I'm not an engineer, and I don't claim to be. It's just nice to finally look at what's happening, what potentially could happen. And the best way to address it. I mean, traffic's gone up over the last decade, but probably not as significantly as people may think it has.
These darn businesses.
It's very commuter orientated. It's very, certain times of the day are heavier than others. So.
I don't agree with Daniel.
Well, Route 9 and 125, the state talk about a roundabout there. We might end up one of them one day there.
Okay, moving on. Thank you very much, Marcia, for your comments. Anybody else have a public comment?
Yes, could we get a towel or something to put in this door? Are you freezing? Oh, I think this is disgusting.
It's so, I'd just like to have the heat turned on. I mean, I'm sitting here now, I could have icicles, but John, you look at it first, John, why we don't have heat?
The draft under the door?
Oh, the draft?
Oh, okay.
This door is terrible.
Yeah, easy problem.
I wear my wool shoes.
All right, since how we don't have any more public comment, we'd like to go into non-public tonight. The reason we need to go into non-public is for personnel, legal, and land.
Land, personnel, and legal.
Yep.
Second motion.
Please start the vote if you're going to.
Here, I.
Hardekopf, aye.
Hatch, aye.
Yeah, Bailey, aye. Motion carries. We'll go to non-public session. Take a 5-minute recess before we start.
Oh, good.